Let's do that real quick. Looking for some trash, motherfucker. Give me all your treasure, trash. Give me all your motherfucking trash. That's a defense +3. Wear good shoes and you'll never see defeat. Make bad puns and you'll always see Funky glare at you. Okay. Defense. You got a defense 2. He's already got a defense 3. Well, in that case, defense 2 me, baby. He's got a defense 1, which we can upgrade to a 2. Don't mind if I do. Anyway, I'm glad you're not doing too shabby there, Frog. I'm doing swell as well. I'm a little tired. I thought I'd be more awake today, but I'm like feeling kind of drowsy almost. Trying to keep up the energy level for this playthrough though. This is old Cerulean Stone Monument. Death Blow 2 again. Chest unleashes a poison gas trap. At least it would if it could, because you looted already and it hates you now. Well, that's just mean. Had a hard day off yesterday? Nah. Just tired in general. Like, you know. I don't really know why. It's not like I didn't sleep well or anything. I slept fine. Ah, yes, you are. I am. Oh. Hello? Huh. Oh, hey, it's Philip. Mrs. Stell, it has been some time since we last met. I don't remember his voice. I guess I could just be like, Mrs. Stell, it has been... What is the voice for this guy? You know what it is? It's fucking warm in my room today. I think that's why I'm feeling so, like the warmth is making me want to just lay back and rest my eyes. You know? When you're warm, you just want to lay down. I kind of wish it was cooler in my room. But it's actually pretty hot outside today, I think. That's why, like, my forehead is sweating, which has not been a problem for the last, month. But today, kind of hot. Give him the Alfred from Batman. Batman. Trying to think of, like, I don't know if I'm very good at doing Alfred. At least not the Alfred from, what I'm picturing is like the Alfred from, like, Batman Begins, you know? Played by that dude. Mr. Stella. Mr. Stella. Mr. Stella. What is he, Italian now? Don't fear, FML is here. Welcome to the stream, FML. How you doing, man? Data doing Sherlock Holmes. Data doing Sherlock Holmes. Oi, crikey. No, that's Australian. Mr. Stell, it has been some time since we last met. I'm trying to think how I want to do this guy's voice. Come on, man. He already showed up in this game, and I don't even remember what I did with his voice earlier. Batman? Mr. Stell, it has been some time since we last met. Have you been to the villa yet recently? We have, actually. I guess you had to go to Grand Cell for some reason. Yes, I was making some purchases on the orders of His Highness the Duke. Did you, perchance, encounter His Highness while you were at the villa? We encountered him, alright. From your expression, I take it he has said something thoughtless to you once again. What was his voice last time, man? I can't remember from, like, last game. Also, I'm remembering now, he works for the fucking douchebag Duke dude. That's where we know him from. As his retainer, you have my utmost apologies. No, he wasn't really rude to me specifically. You don't need to apologize. I wasn't bothered one bit, I swear. Your kindness does you credit, Mrs. Stell. Now, I fear I must be off, if you'll pardon me. for I was not able to get your donuts, Batman. I guess Philip's job is even harder now. He's been taking care of Dunan since Dunan was young, right? Huh? You really shouldn't underestimate him. Even I can tell he's not just any old guy. Oh. Huh? What do you mean, Ren? Oh, you know, like how he can walk with his eyes closed? I sure couldn't do that. Oh. Wow. I think they're just narrowed, Ren, not closed. Wow, what a racist little girl, huh? I mean, you notice how he opens his eyes when surprised, right? Really? I didn't. I want to see. Maybe I can get a good look if I surprise him next time. Did I nail the voice? I don't feel like I did. But hey, I can't really hear the voices actually coming out of my mouth like exactly how it sounds, not till later. So, if you say I nailed it, Frog, I will believe you. And try to remember to do it again next time when he shows up 5 chapters from now. Now, he'll probably be in this chapter again at some point. But yes, definitely suspicious, but then again, if it was the little girl's observation, either she's being coy about it, or she's really just a dumb little girl. I guess we'll just wait and see. Uh-huh. With Chloe, you would have got more dialogue. See, that's why I should have brought Chloe. I knew I should have once I saw the fucking Duke douchebag. Anyway, okay, let's get back to the guild. We need to talk to Elnon about Ren. There's that, but our army contact should be showing up soon. You didn't forget about that, right? Oh, crying out. Huh? What's wrong? You said you're gonna show me to this guild place, right? Huh. Well, milady, please lend me your hand. I, Olivier Lenheim, shall have the honor of escorting you. No, thank you. I'd rather Miss Estelle show me. My disappointments are ceaseless. Sorry, Olivier. No luck. Come on, Ren. I'll show you the Bracer Guild. Yay! Olivier getting punked all day. When's Tifa gonna join the party? In the 7th game. Anyway, we're back, Elnon. Oh? Hi, Estelle! Oh man, I'm gonna have to do 2 little girl voices now? Uh-oh. Here we go. They're gonna sound the same, by the way. Because Tita's here, by the way, if you didn't notice. Oh, this guy again. Hello again, Miss Bright. We seem to be running into each other quite a bit these days. Well, hey there, Colonel Sid. Thought the old man might send you, Sid. You're back from Laced Fortress, I see. That's right. I just arrived a little while ago on one of our patrol ships. I apologize for the wait. Nah, it's okay. We actually had a little job of our own to take care of. Huh? Speaking of which, would that young lady be? Oh, right. Yeah, she is. Some stuff went down, so we had to bring her along. Hey, Ren. We've got some things we need to talk about with the army man. Can you go wait on the 2nd floor? Oh, is this work stuff? Yeah, I'm sorry. I guess I don't mind. You're just like Papa. It's always work, work, work. I don't really like that very much. Ren, right? Do you want to talk for a little while? I want to get to know you. With you? Well, okay, I guess we could. Hehe, okay. We'll be on the 2nd floor, Estelle. Okay, so Tita and the other little girl are going away. Thank God. No little girl voice. The less they talk, the better. I don't want to do that voice right now. Phew, saved by the Tita. Well, your report on the situation can wait for now. Let's hear out Colonel Sid first. Sure. Lay it on us, Sid. Thank you. I'm in a hurry myself. So this is an official request from the Royal Army. There's a series of incidents we'd like you to investigate. Incidents? Why does the way you say that make me shiver a bit? You're aware of the non-aggression pact, yes? I'm afraid threatening letters have been delivered to all parties involved in the signing. Someone's threatening the treaty? That's not good at all. What do the letters say exactly? Please have a look. To all parties involved in the non-aggression pact, immediately back down from this act of deceit and false compromise. Should you not, a great disaster will be visited upon you. What in the... Yeah, that's a threat, all right. Is this the whole thing? Yep, that's the entire thing. As you may have noticed, there is no name or any other indication of a sender. Normally I'd simply dismiss it as a prank, however. However, something about the situation makes you believe it's more than a bad joke, yes? Yes, it's the volume of letters sent, see? First arrived at Leyston Fortress. Copies were then sent to the Airship Company, Grandsell Cathedral, Hotel Rowenbaum, and the Liberal News Service. Then copies arrived at both the Erebonian and Calvarn embassies, the Herb Royal Villa, and even Grandsell Castle itself. 9 letters in total. Who'd send that many letters? Who has that much money for stamps? God. Yeah, that'd be a lot of work for a pranked in poor taste. 9 whole letters? You barely even have 10 fingers. How can you send 9 letters? That is unfathomable. I could see why the army would start to get concerned. I don't get it, though. The Airship Company, the Liberal News, the friggin' hotel and church, they don't seem to have anything to do with the signing. They are not totally unrelated, to be honest. The airship companies shall be sending out charter vessels to ferry the Imperial and Republican officials here. They will, of course, be staying at the Rowenbaum. Furthermore, the church, or specifically Archbishop Courant of the cathedral, has been asked to be an observer at the signing, and the Liberal News has been preparing a special report on the pact and signing for weeks. So they are all connected somehow. So do we have any idea who's behind it? That could be a difficult question to answer. This is an international matter, meaning anyone from Liberal, Erebonia, or Calvard could be responsible. Yes, the Warhawks in either the Empire or the Republic, for starters. It could even be someone from another country entirely who isn't happy to see all 3 countries working together. Of course, there are plenty of suspects in Liberal as well. And we can't forget the obvious answer, the Society. So what exactly do you want us to investigate, Sid? Right then, the mission. We would like for you to investigate all the locations that have received the letters and see if anyone has any further leads. Minus Leyston and Herb, that is, we'll handle those, but the other 7 locations are yours. So the Airship Company, Grandsell Cathedral, Hotel Rowenbaum, the Liberal News, the Erebonian Embassy, the Calvardian Embassy, and Grandsell Castle. That will involve a bit of walking. More to the point, uninformed soldiers asking around would attract a great deal of unwanted attention. Now that you lack an intelligence division, it makes sense to ask the Guild to help investigate such matters. And as embarrassing as the situation is, you're exactly right. Without a functional intelligence division, we're very limited in what we can do. However, the new general plan from the top for us is to have the Guild help us with as many tasks as possible. This is simply one case of that. Oh, really? Thanks a heap, Dad. Yeah, that's about what I'd expect from the old man. I must admit it was my request to ask for you, however. So this was Sid's fault, not all Cassius's fault. I've been placed in charge of the defense of the capital region until the signing ceremony. I would like as much information as I can possibly obtain in order to prepare a proper defense. Can I ask that you take this job? Oh, well, I do want to help, but we're really kind of hip-deep in another case at this point. That girl, right? Let us hear your report on the situation now. Explain the situation about Ren being abandoned. I see, yes. An abandoned child is a problem you simply cannot simply ignore. Why would anyone do such a thing? It's kind of freaking me out, too. I actually met her parents once, briefly. They seemed like this really thoughtful, loving couple. They adore Ren, from what I saw. I have to think something really, really serious happened to make them leave her. Possibly. They may have also gotten tangled in something and wanted to keep their child out of it. I do see an opportunity to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, however. Huh? Ren and her parents are foreigners, remember? You'll need to inquire at the hotel and the embassies regardless. Hey, I think I know where you're going with this. And it just so happens they got threatened. We'd want to check with the airship company too, come to think. I'll put out a general alert to all army posts to watch for her parents as well. Should they pass through any of the gate checkpoints, we should know. Thanks, Colonel. Sounds like you could take the job after all. Colonel, you may leave the investigation to us. I presume you'll want a final report in paper and in person, however? Yes, we prefer to avoid telephones to avoid any risk of interception. You'll be able to find me at the Herb Royal Villa beginning today, actually. I'm sorry for the extra trouble, but could I ask that you bring the final report there in person? Sure. We'll see you at the villa once we know what's up. I wish you luck then. After seeing Colonel sit out, Estelle's team decided to split up to investigate. Estelle, Zin, Olivia, and Chloe were headed to embassies. Okay. Agate would investigate the Cathedral Hotel and airship on his own. On his own? Okay. Okay, we'll be heading out. Tita, Ren, sorry to leave you two behind. Oh, it's okay. We're going out shopping. Oh, what? Sorry, Estelle. Ren really wants to visit the department store. Why, that's not how I remember things, Tifa. As I recall, you were the one who said you wanted to look at all the stuffed animals. Ah, Ren! Well, I know you're bored, Ren, but since I'm not sure that when we'll find out something about your parents, I'd like for you to wait here. Oh, come on, that's so not fair. Double doe-eye stares? Ah, it'll be cool. Tita's with her, so they should be fine if they're just out shopping and stuff. I guess so. Okay, Tita, Ren, we'll be back by this evening, so you need to be back by then too, okay? And the capital's a really big place, so don't get lost. We will, and we won't. Ren, let's go. After you. See you, everyone. Okay. Lots of talking, I agree, guys, I agree. They sure became fast friends. Yeah, it's really easy to become friends at that age. Man, youth. I feel all old now. Although, Tita and Ren together, why does that combination send a chill of doom down my spine? Oh, I think they'll be fine. Tita's kind of easy to push around, though. I get the feeling Ren might try to drag her into all sorts of stuff. That might be a good point. Oh yeah, Elma. Did you get the names of that kid's parents? It took a little insistent asking, but she eventually gave them. Her father's a trader from Crossbell. Harold and Sophia Hayworth are their names. Trader from Crossbell, Harold and Sophia Hayworth. Okay, got it written down. I got it too. Alright, let's get this investigation started. So remember, Estelle's group will investigate or visit the embassies, the castle, and the news. Got it. Zin, Olivier, will be counting on your aid at the embassies. Fear not, my brilliant smile can open up any door. We'll make sure you see the ambassadors. Your Highness, your help would be valuable at Grancel Castle. Please introduce Estelle to whoever you can. Whoever can best help our investigation. Of course. As for the liberal news, I believe you yourself have an in for that, Estelle. Yep, I can bug Niall about it. He kinda owes me at this point. And that leaves the cathedral, the airship company, and the Rowan bomb. Agate, good luck with those. No prob, shouldn't take too long. So let's go! Sweet, Agate. We're finally ditching Agate, thank God. I've been waiting. Time to get questioning then. Where should we start? I don't think it matters too much. If you want to go to the Calvardian Embassy, you've got a free pass with me around. I can introduce you to Elsa whenever. I, of course, can get us into the Erebonian Embassy. They should be glad to escort us if I introduce myself at the gate. And of course, I'd rather doubt it would be very hard for me to get us into Grancel Castle. It might be wise to simply go straight there and speak with Grandmother. I kind of doubt the liberal news will give us any trouble either, so let's just pick a direction and go. Let's just pick a direction so I can fucking talk for a second and not have to read for like 2 goddamn seconds. Missing exhibit? Hold on. A bit ago, one of our exhibits was removed by someone. It's not too valuable, so let's just prank. Oh boy, we gotta go to the museum. Fucking Jimmy! It better not be Jimmy. If Jimmy stole something from the goddamn fucking museum, I'm gonna kick his ass. Alright, anyway, just turn in my Monster Quest real quick. And actually, before I go any further, I'm gonna take a quick 2-minute break. I'm gonna go use the restroom real quick. Be right back. Back from break, let's do this. Okay. I think I'm going to start off by starting this side quest at the museum because it is a short-term quest. I don't know how short. It might end as soon as we start looking around too much here in Grancel. So let's just go to the museum now and figure out what we need to do for this. Hello. Lately, even the museum head and curator seems to be very busy. I hope they don't fall ill. Well, here's fucking Jimmy. Handed over the thing to the museum director. Apparently they're looking into whether or not it's something the museum can hold on to. So I'm having a wander while they check it out. Okay. Hello there, how can I help you? Better yet, how can we help you? We're with the Bracer Guild, sir. Oh, excellent. I was hoping someone would come soon. Let's waste no time getting down to business. Sure. Yeah, sure. So what was stolen? About that. Did you notice anything off here? Off? This is the airship gallery, right? Hey, now that you mention it, something does seem to be missing. You're right, Estelle. There was a portrait of the Arsai on this wall, as I recall. Now that you mention it, Chloe, I do remember something like that being here. How could I forget? I saw the portrait myself while touring the capital. Guess we know why you called us now. The portrait of the Arsai was stolen, wasn't it? Precisely that. It was there this morning, but around noon or so, I'd noticed that it was gone. This card was on the wall in its place. Uh-oh. Oh, beauteous princess and her loyal companions, the image of the proud white falcon has fallen into my hands. Should you seek it, then answer my challenge. The first key is in the residence of the aged general. Search the onlooker of time. The residence of the aged general. Okay. Him again. All rivalry burns brighter still. Yeah, sounds like Phantom Thief Blue Blanc, alright. You guys told me about him, and I thought you were exaggerating. You already know who the criminal is? Now that's what I call reassuring. I have every confidence that you'll crack this case. We won't let you down. We'll be back before you know it. Mm-hmm, sure we will. The House of the Aged General. House of the Aged General? Morgan's house? Is Morgan's house in this place? Like in this town? Hold on. Time for another hour and a half of this shit. I know, right? Sword Sage? Good lord. I hope not. So the problem with this place is way bigger, so I'm gonna get a little bit more confused. But I think... Whose house is this again? Bought a new rod to replace my old one. I'm using the same rod since I started fishing, so I was about to find an upgrade. What to do with my old rod? My husband only uses new top-class rods, you see. You fish, don't you? Huh? Well, some. How did she know? Well then, allow me to offer you this. Oh, sick. New bamboo fishing rods. Sick. Wow, thank you. Make sure to catch plenty of fish with it. I actually just received the rank of Master Fisher. Oh, shit. Now I can be counted alongside people like Lloyd. You know Lloyd, don't you? He's a wonderful fisherman. Once my husband comes back from the castle, I'm going to positively rub it in his face. Oh, I will. You reek of fish, girl. Indeed. You have over 700 biddies, FML? Oh my god, what are you going to do with all that? Okay, so nobody important lives there. This is just... I don't remember if the general... Oh wait, here's another house. Yes! General Morgan's residence. Here we go. I'm looking for stuff. Good search changes because we seem to smile more custom scene. For all my husband's dislike of bracers, he certainly speaks to them quite a lot recently. Perhaps it's Cassius' influence, as shocking as that would be. Not really a surprise, though. Cassius was a bracer for a long time. You're going to spend it on a special person? Well, FML, I guess I'm just not special enough for you. I'm sorry. I met a girl in a white dress a little while ago at the cathedral. I wish I could have played with her. Whatever, dude. I already forgot what the fucking clue was. Onlooker of time. Oh, well there it is. I was looking for a clock. I honestly didn't even see it. Huh, so the aged general is probably General Morgan. In that case, is this the onlooker of time? I'd say it's likely. We'll need to check inside. Alright. Estelle asked and received permission from the owners. Okay. Upon inspection, they found a card stuck to the back. Second key is in the city. Seek the symbol perched on the ground. As we thought. To think something like that was in the house. Well, this guy isn't the type to harm people who aren't involved in his weird plans, so don't worry about that. Best to close up tight at night, just in case there's any more mischief, though. Yes, of course. Yes, we'll be careful. All right, shall we continue? Okay, so in the city, symbol perched on the ground. Is there some sort of bird symbol on the ground somewhere? I don't remember, unless it's a bird, actual bird. Guessing it's not in this area. Symbol perched on the ground in the city. Oh, maybe it's this guy. The bird fountain. The symbol perched on the ground, huh? This white falcon symbol seems suspect to me. This bird is the symbol of liberal, so it would stand out. Let's have a look. There's a card stuck to the base of the iron fence. Third key is in the foreign manse. Examine the will of the Blue Knight. The foreign manse? The foreign manse? Alright, we got it. What does the Blue Knight mean? Is he talking about the Royal Guard? They do certainly wear blue uniforms. I think not. It says the foreign manse, so I don't think the Royal Guard makes sense. More than anything else, it wouldn't be beautiful, so we should try something else. Is that right? Well, it is coming from someone similar, so I guess maybe I should listen to the warning here. The bird perched on the ground took you forever? Wow. I'm sorry it took me only like 2 seconds. I mean, I was just looking for a bird on the ground, or something that looked like a bird, or wings. But apparently I found a bird statue, which is even better. So foreign manse would make me think it's one of the embassies. But yeah. Alright, so I guess we can just head to each embassy and check them, because we gotta go there anyways. Hey, how goes? Huh? Zin? Holy crap! Wasting time in Liberalville again? Haha, something like that. Thought I'd say hello to Elsa, and I have something I need to talk to her about. Is she in? Well, I haven't seen her leave, so I guess she's around. Oh, who's with you? Gotta ask, you know, policy. Oh, they're helping me with some guild work. I'm going to introduce them to Elsa. Huh, well, okay. If they're with you, Zin, I guess I can let them in. Cool, cool. So, welcome to the Calvardian Embassy. Oh, do keep in mind that the Embassy Hall is Calvard soil. Calvard and Liberal are friends, but still, keep your nose clean, eh? You hear that, Olivier? And again my heart is assaulted with arrows. How little trust you have in me. And why would we have trust? You kind of forgot the bird was a national symbol, and you also forgot that statue was even there. Well, I didn't remember the statue being there, but as soon as they said perched, I just think bird, right? A bird is usually perched, or something that fly usually is perched. That was my immediate, thought, right? Also, thank you for the one whole bit, FML. You are... Wait, did you even give me a bit? I think you gave me a bit. I guess you gave me a bit. Thank you for the one whole bit. Ooh, magnificent. Wow, this is the Calvardian Embassy? I didn't expect it to be quite so fancy. And yet it's a bit exotic as well. I really like it. Well, quite a few people from even farther east have settled in Calvard, you know. They've had an impact on our culture, too. Anyway, Elsa's office is the furthest room on the second floor. Alrighty. Alright, let's explore this place. I don't think we've ever been here before. Hey, I'm back. I might end up borrowing a room, so I'll be in your care if that happens. Of course. Got everything squeaky clean for you. Girl likes to keep it squeaky and clean. Oh, I see you gave me one whole unicorn. Not just one bit. One unicorn. Sorry. I feel even more fucking privileged. You all are. Why, if it isn't Zin. Counselor, pleasure. All together here, are they your guests? Yes, they're co-workers with the guild. Are you here about the threat letter? It is, as you guessed. It's a request from the Royal Army. Do you have any ideas? Threat letters like that aren't exactly rare in the Republic. To be honest, I barely paid any heed at all. True, there are a lot of radical groups in the country. Yes, they always cause trouble when the issue of immigration comes up. Well, this time at least I can't say anything. Why don't you see what Ambassador Cochrane thinks first? Yes, we'll do that right now, if you'll pardon us. Yeah, don't mind me, I'm just looking around because I've never been in here before, and I'm looking for a Blue Knight of what? What was it? Will of the Blue Knight. I don't know what that means, but maybe we'll see soon. The Doll Knight? Ooh, the Doll Knights? Oh my god, is it in one of the chapters of this fucking shit? Long ago, in a certain little village, there lived a young boy, 13 years old. His name was Pedro. Pedro was a small boy, not very strong, but his fingers were dexterous enough to astonish anyone. When he moved his whittling knife, wooden blocks would turn into birds. Wonderful creatures by magic. The boy spent his days with these crafts of his life. One day, strange travelers came by the village, an old man with sharp eyes, and I don't want to read all this. If the clue is in here, I don't want to not read it, because the clue might be here. I read the genie one last game. I did. Oh, why did I do that? No. Alright, fine. Here we go. Who's ready for a story? It's time for a story. It's time for a story. So here we go. Are you ready? One day, strange travelers came by the village. An old man with sharp eyes and a large man in a black garb casually strolled into the general store, whereupon their eyes were drawn to a wooden bird so cunningly carved that one could almost hear its wings beat the air. It was Pedro's latest creation. After inquiring with the owner of the general store, the old man and his escort came upon the little house where Pedro lived, and the first words they had for him were, "Prepare your things. We're leaving for the city." Pedro's eyes widened in shock at the order. "What is this?" he cried. "Who are you people?" His eyes fell on a large man in black. Pedro's words caught in his throat. The old man chuckled. "So you did notice, I thought you would." From the old man's fingers stretched transparent threads. He gestured and the black-garbed man bowed gracefully. The immense man was a clockwork puppet. "He is the Black Priest," the old man said. "My finest work." His wrinkled face ceased further as he smiled slyly. He was the famous master Capri Oratoria, a puppeteer known throughout Luna. Oratoria fixed Pedro with a beady eye. "You could craft something even greater than this. Doesn't the mere thought excite you?" No more words were needed. Tossing his carving knife into a sack, Pedro fixed his cap on his head and greeted his new master by saying farewell to his old home. That was chapter 1, y'all. Ready for chapter 2? Chapter 2. The Blue Knight! Oh shit, I might be able to skip the rest of reading this because it's in chapter 2. The years passed swiftly for Pedro at Oratoria's workshop on the outskirts of the capital. Under the tutelage of puppeteer Capri, he learned the techniques to build clockwork puppets and the skills to make them dance and perform. After 3 years of training, he completed his own masterpiece, a doll of noble bearing dressed in an armor with a gleaming blue helm. If Capri's masterwork, the Black Priest, was a martial arts type focused on maneuverability, then Pedro's blue puppet was a well-bound swordsman. Its counterattacks as it turned aside, the Black Priest's punches and kicks were the very image of a graceful knight. "What will you call it?" Capri asked. Pedro had no answer. He had been so focused in his creation that he hadn't actually thought of one. Ultimately, it would become to be called the Blue Knight before he could name it. It was some time after Pedro constructed the Blue Knight that the king who ruled from the city would pass on from their world. The king had been long ill, so there was little shock and the mourning period passed smoothly. So, in accordance with the law, the king's only daughter, Princess Tia, would ascend to the throne as queen. Okay. Chapter 2 is done. Chapter 3. On the road home. Pedro visited the city accompanied by the Blue Knight. With the crowning ceremony approaching, the streets were abuzz with excitement. As he strolled the city center, people passing by cast strange looks his way. What a noble knight he must be. I'm sure he must be quite the famous hero. Do you suppose he's attending the crowning ceremony? Trailing quietly behind the Blue Knight, Pedro could hardly keep himself from doing a little dance. It felt like a step towards Capri, who could control the Black Priest as if it was human itself. Of course, at the same time, he found it annoying that the others thought him the servant of his own creation. He was on his way back to the workshop outside of town that Pedro's humming was interrupted by a scream. "No, please stop!" cried a voice from the woods. "No one's going to save you," a man growled. "Give up and give in!" From the looks of things, some thuggish men had a girl cornered. Dainty and clad in a white dress, the girl's searching eyes sought desperately for a way to flee from the danger. Pedro squared his shoulders and lowering his cap to his knees. Or his eyes, rather. Lowering his cap to his shadow... Pedro squared his shoulders and lowering his cap to shadow his eyes, he set his fingers in motion. The Blue Knight charged forward. Chapter 3 end. Chapter 4. A Righteous Display. Upon seeing the Blue Knight appear like a shadow from the heart of the forest, the men harassing the girl could only gape in amazement. "Leave the girl and leave this place," the Blue Knight declared from the depths of his helmet. Was the ventriloquism that the old master had drilled into his head as a secret of puppeteering. Who the hell are you? Get out of here before you get hurt. Fools. With a jab from his clockwork fist, the Blue Knight knocked back the man holding the woman and pivoted swiftly to kick both men away. "Are you hurt, young lady?" "No, I am well." "Good. 'Twould be best if you stood back." At last the Blue Knight drew its sword. Swathed in black, the third man, who seemed like the leader, approached. Not bad for a wanderer. Pedro eyed the new arrival. The black-garbed man's stance suggested he knew something of proper swordsmanship. "Enough playing, though. Hand over the girl and I'll see you rewarded." "To ignore one's duty is to be without courage. I fear I cannot do that," said the Blue Knight. "Well then, die!" screamed the black-garbed man, and attacked. Chapter 4 end. Chapter 5. The Girl with the Sky Blue Eyes. The man in black attacked. From the upper right, he feinted as if to strike the shoulder, but twisted it with his wrist and changed to slash across the body. Pedro, having read the feint, pulled at his strings. The Blue Knight stepped back a half step, dodging the horizontal slash, and smacked the outstretched blades, knocking it from his foe's hands. "Impossible!" The blackguard man rubbed his numb hand and paled as the Blue Knight shifted slightly. As if it was a sign, the thugs turned and scattered like baby spiders. The girl gave a sigh of relief and curtsied. "Thank you very much." She was a little bit shaky, but her manner was that of a noblewoman. "It is the duty of every knight to protect. Pay it no mind." "Ah, are you from a foreign lands, perhaps?" Suddenly Pedro was struck with a moment of whimsy. "I am a touring knight, Pedro. The boy, there is my servant," he made the puppet reply. "Huh?" The girl finally seemed to notice him. She faced him with an expression of bewilderment. However, Pedro was no less surprised indeed. His shock was many, many times greater than hers. Cool turquoise blue eyes, that familiar, achingly lovely form. It was the same girl he had seen at the ceremonies and from the balcony of the palace. "Your Highness," he blurted. The girl, wrapped in pure white, was the very girl who had just lost her father and was to be crowned in the capital. It was Princess Tia. Dun dun dun! Chapter 5? Wait, no, we just read Chapter 5. Sorry. Chapter 6. Lost track. The Melancholy of a Princess. "Would you be willing to guard me for these 2 weeks until the crowning ceremony?" In the royal throne room, Princess Tia asked this question with a serious expression. Of course, she asked, if not of Pedro, but of the Blue Knight. "Have you not a royal guard? Surely you would be far better off with them as your protectors." Unable to say that the Blue Knight was a puppet, Pedro followed her as far as the throne room. He shivered, sensing even more trouble about to come. "The royal guard that protect the capital they obey the words of my uncle Duke Gaston, even before they abandoned me and fled," Princess Tia said softly. Duke Gaston was a man surrounded by bad rumors, as it was his open secret that he took advantage of the previous king's illness to line his own purse. "The man in black you confronted, Sir Pedro, I am sure that was my uncle's second in command. All of it was planned." Princess Tia's sky-blue eyes clouded. At this point, the kindly Pedro could hardly refuse the role of escort. "Understood, I shall accept your request," he had the Blue Knight reply. Princess Tia's smile was like the sun breaking through the clouds. "Thank you, Sir Knight. Thank you so very much." She turned towards Pedro as well. "And you too, good servant. May I ask for your name?" Pedro hid his eyes once more in the shadow of his cap. "I'm no one worthy of naming myself." Chapter 7. Turbulent Days. Protecting the princess proved harder than predicted. After all, almost every day there were new ne'er-do-wells sent after her. Eventually, partially due to their closeness in age, Princess Tia and Pedro, still playing the servant, came to speak very openly to each other. While glad for the princess's trust, he didn't know what he would do if the truth of the Blue Knight came out. Pedro was beside himself with worry. On the other side of the city, a letter was delivered to a certain puppet workshop. "What is that boy doing?" Guessing the circumstances from the very vague statements in Pedro's letter, the priest sighed and gave a bitter smile. "However, perhaps this is a good chance," he mused. Pedro was ever bright and straight as an arrow, yet his thoughts were always of puppets. Partially due to living outside the city, he had no friends he could call close, and yet it hardly seemed as if he felt lonely for it. While the role of escort to the princess was perhaps beyond his station, if it proved a chance to awaken more human feelings in his apprentice, Capri could only wish him the best, and with with a parent's heart. And I think this is the last chapter on this shelf. What makes the darkness shake? That girl has the devil's own luck. Wait, this is the right one, right? Hold up. Let me make sure I didn't skip chapter 7, did I? No, okay. We're good, sorry. Chapter 8. I keep losing track of the number because they don't fucking mark that I already read them. Anyway, what makes the dark shake? That girl has the devil's own luck. In a dim room lit by flickering candle flames, Duke Gaston cursed hatefully. He felt not a moment of sympathy or care for his niece. At this rate, she shall see the crowning ceremony, he snarled. He snarled? This night, Pedro, can't we handle him? He's the first man so skilled that we've encountered. We fear that even if the royal guard attacked all at once, it might be difficult. Recalling the shame of having his sword knocked from his hands, Duke Gaston's second-in-command bit his lip. Still, we have nothing to fear, he said. While a bit of an odd in character, we have hired a skilled assassin to handle this, my lord. Odd? What sort of person is he? Ahaha, did you call? The flames danced bewitchingly, then went out as one, as if something tremendously heavy had collapsed down onto it. The carpeted floor shook with a thud. Who is it? Duke Gaston took a step back. The shadow illuminated by the moon was tremendous and inhuman. My lord, fear not. This is our assassin, Harlequin. He will remove all of that is in your way with this puppet. The assassin sketched a mocking bow. I do love hunting. I don't take jobs unless the prey is lively. A sickening laugh shook the darkness, bringing a nasty smile to the Duke's face as well. Worry not, I am sure your hunt will be most enjoyable. And so did the night, bathed in red by a crimson moon, fade to dawn, melting like ice. Okay, well that's 1/3 of the book. Chapter 9! Afternoon in the Lesser Palace. Here we go. Afternoon in the palace began with a tea party in the gardens. The princess has always filled 3 cups with the black tea from the pot. Please enjoy your tea. My thanks, the Blue Knight intoned. Thank you very much, Pedro said. Pedro moved the Blue Knight with his left hand as he sipped the tea made by the princess. It was the happiest moment in his otherwise busy days. Good servant, you seem to really enjoy your tea. It makes it very effort for the one who made it. Haha, you are too kind. Smiling bitterly, Pedro pulled his strings. The Blue Knight in one go emptied the tea into the cup and into the leather sack in his neck. At this, Princess Tia could only sigh. Whereas Sir Pedro seems to hardly find it delicious at all, it makes it difficult to be motivated. Pardon me, I fear I am an impolite man. In his heart, Pedro felt a nervous edge, but the Blue Knight answered with an ever-calm face. There had been countless moments where it seemed as if everything would be revealed, but Princess Tia showed no signs of doubting the truth of the Blue Knight. The princess smiled faintly, but her expression quickly turned somber. I suppose it doesn't matter. These fun afternoons will end tomorrow after the crowning ceremony the following day, and you shall both leave the city after all. Or will they? Chapter 10. A faint pain. At the princess's lonely words, Pedro's heart beat as fast as a drum. I fear I'm a man on the path of a warrior, so my apologies, the Blue Knight said. No, I should apologize. I shall hardly make much of a queen like this. The princess shook herself and smiled brightly. Forgetting to control the puppet, Pedro ducked his head to hide the longing in his face. He would have loved to stay as her guard. Though she might have been of noble birth, Princess Tia was a lonely girl who had lost her father. However, she had been speaking not of the servant like Pedro, but of the Blue Knight. To the princess, Pedro was simply part of the package. Thinking that made his chest hurt somehow as a pain that such he had never felt when he was handling the puppets. Ultimately, Pedro had chosen. Even if it meant saddening the princess to flee from this unbearable pain in his chest. Ah, would you like a second cup? As if to clear this heavy atmosphere, the princess offered the pot with a smile. Ooh, that does sound good. Mind giving me a cup? With an unnerving laugh, a shadow leapt in. What? A sudden gust tore through the garden, sending the tea set flying off the table. Crimson wings beat the air as an immense puppet in the form of a devil fell to the earth. Sorry for interrupting your lovely tea party. Would you mind playing with me for a bit? On the devil's left arm was a human figure. It was the masked puppeteer Harlequin. I'll make sure it's plenty of fun, he giggled. Oh boy. The plot thickens. Chapter 11, The Devil's Attack. Lady Tia, stand back! Pedro, shielding the princess behind him, sent the Blue Knight forward towards the Crimson Devil's right arm. It was a blind spot for the masked puppeteer. With a rapid turn, the knight let loose a heavy strike. The tip of the sword was swallowed up in the base of the creature's wing. The demon's right arm flashed up, bladed claws scraped, sending sparks into the air. Losing its balance, the Blue Knight took an unsteady step back. The demon gave a shiver, and a barbed tail thick as a log screamed through the air, striking forward. Astonished by the technique, Pedro snapped the Blue Knight back, dodging the tail swipe. Oh, you are good. I didn't think you were in the same business. The masked puppeteer spoke not to the Blue Knight, but to Pedro. The Blue Knight, as if to interrupt these words, pointed to its sword at the puppeteer. What nonsense are you speaking? If you shall not come, then I shall strike first! Even now, Pedro tried to hide it. Princess Tia was with a confused expression gazed upon the preceding events. I see. So that's how it is. The masked puppeteer, as if suddenly realizing the situation, laughed softly. My, well, let no one call me rude. If you'd rather not share, I'll stay quiet. But you know. The puppeteer's voice dipped low and was tinged with a roiling darkness. If you don't even have that much guts, then even thinking you can win against my calamity is naive! And Chapter 12? The Crimson Demon. The demon doll Calamity kicked the ground and launched itself into the air, closing the gap in an instant. Pedro reacted just a moment too slow, so intent was he on not wanting the princess to notice. It was the tiniest of openings, but it was one that would prove fatal. First the sword was knocked from clockwork hands, then the claws continued to dig in, cutting through the blue armor like butter. Oh my, what's wrong? The tail whipped in, encircling the Blue Knight. With a twitch of the puppeteer's fingers, the tail tightened, crushing both the knight's arms. Ha ha! Caught you! The claws grabbed the Blue Knight by its feathered helm and lifted it up off its feet. Stop! The first puppet he made, that he put so much effort into, was being torn to pieces. Pedro lost himself for a moment and ran forward. You are so impatient. No need to worry, I was going to give him back. The Crimson Demon held the Blue Knight high and threw it down towards Pedro. Gah! The Blue Knight crashed into Pedro and bowled him over. He lay in a crumpled heap upon the lawn under the body of the puppet. Please stop! Oh, that's the princess. Please stop! The princess stepped between the fallen pair and the masked puppeteer, her arms spread wide. I offer myself to you. In return, I command you to cease this senseless violence. Indeed. Sorry. Wrong chapter. Chapter 13! Yay! Saying goodbye. I offer myself to you in return and command you to cease the sense of violence. At Princess Tia's bold words to the puppeteer licked his lips loudly. You'd offer yourself in place of your god? Why, you bring tears to my eyes, princess. You mustn't, Lady Tia. Barely conscious, Pedro desperately tried to put words together. He had not the energy to use ventriloquism. My master, Pedro, is fine. Leave it to him. Hurry, run. Sir Pedro, silence! At the princess's angry words, Pedro managed to open his eyes fully, for those words were addressed most surely to he, still garbed and acting as servant. You knew? I'm sorry, I pretended not to notice. The princess smiled in a sad, lonely way, then turned to the puppeteer again with a dignified expression. Now, take me to my uncle. My oh my, what a princess you are! I bet you would have made quite the queen, too. The demon slowly stretched out its right arm when the princess stepped on and began to beat its crimson wings. Sir Pedro, thank you so much. This last week was very fun. These words of goodbye sunk into his brain. As he watched the scarlet shadow be swallowed into the blue sky, Pedro's consciousness slowly faded into darkness. We can't not read the rest of this now. We're in the thick of the story, man! Chapter 14, The Cost of Deceit. The next morning, when Pedro opened his eyes, he found himself in his room at the doll workshop. Safe on his familiar firm bed, he felt a rush of relief. It had all been a dream. Capri called out from the workshop. Oh, how are you feeling? Pedro craned his neck. On the workbench in the back, he glimpsed disassembled blue parts spread out across the wood. He leaped up, panicked. It wasn't a dream. It seemed Capri had used the Black Priest to bring Pedro in the broken form of the Blue Knight back from the castle. It's my fault. Pedro's eyes trailed over his former masterpiece, now reduced to junk. His memory then trailed back over cool turquoise blue eyes, a warm smile like a ray of sunlight, and fine fingers pouring black tea. Pedro ground his lip between his teeth. The Blue Knight wasn't good enough. If I had any talent as a puppeteer, I would have been able to protect the Princess Tia. It seems you don't understand, Capri muttered. His face took on a rare expression of severity. What you lack is here! In a forceful motion, he jabbed his finger against Pedro's chest. Pedro could only blink in shock. Ooh, got him. Chapter 15, A Little Decision. Her Highness knew of the truth of the Blue Knight, and yet you chose to pretend not to. Do you really not understand why? Because, Unexpectedly, in the depths of his mind, he had a flash of insight. Sir Pedro, silence, she had said, and then, I pretended not to notice. He recalled the sad, lonely smile she gave him when she revealed it. Something hot boiled up inside his chest. Pedro raised his head and fixed Capri with an intense gaze. Master, I beg of you, help me repair the Blue Knight. The old man studied his face. The masked puppeteer you fought is a man feared like a demon in our trade. A half-baked man can't hope to match him. Do you understand? Even so, I will, for the person who believed in me. When he said this, Capri smiled broadly, as if something grand had just fallen in his lap. It was the day before the crowning ceremony at the palace. At the palace, the princess's absence had been noticed in the royal keep. It fell into an uproar from top to bottom. I found the card! Let's go. The door has already been opened. Join the dance of the valorous. Huh. I'm not sure what that means. Oh, look what I found. Oh, I get it. I guess this is technically considered Republican territory. It absolutely is a foreign menace. And the Blue Knight is a character from the novel, I think. Yeah, we've just been reading it for the last 20 minutes. Jeez, he sure is detail-oriented. Anyway, I got a feeling that this next one's the last of them. Dance of the Valorous? Now, where could that be? I'm not even sure. I'll come back to that. We still got more story to read, y'all. Chapter 16, let's go! The Duke's private manor. Oh, God. Here we go. On the outskirts of the capital in Duke Gaston's manor, Princess Tia sat in a lush room carpeted in deep crimson. It's perfect for you, Princess. With a satisfied expression, Duke Gaston glared at his bound prisoner. What do you intend to do about the crowning ceremony today? Princess Tia asked in a quiet voice. The Duke shrunk in a bit under her icy gaze. I'm afraid you will be absent, and so the throne and staff will be offered to me, the second in line. Do you believe the people will accept you? To change the subject, Tia, I have found someone willing to accept you as a bride. Seeing the sky-colored eyes waver for a moment, the Duke smiled with renewed confidence. He is the second Imperial son, and quite the connection. The Duke's smile widened. While you learn the joys of womanhood in a new land, you can leave the rest to me. It was a cowardly plan. Certainly it wasn't a scenario that would be accepted for the Duke to take the throne in place of the first heir. However, it was different if the princess were to marry. If that were to pass, anyone could see that Duke Gaston's ascent to the throne was all but a done deal. My lord, it's about time. As his second-in-command's comment, the Duke stood. I'm sure you are quite tired from the daily attacks. Take the chance to rest and recover. The Duke gave a chuckle at his own shamelessness and left the room. At that moment, that won't be happening! There's a tremendous crash and a glass window exploded into glittering powder! Cliffhanger, y'all. Alright. How many chapters are left? Okay, there's only 5 left, and... Okay, 6. There's a finale, too. Thank God. Okay, here we go. Chapter 17. And so the boy becomes a man. Like a graceful leopard, a tall knight clad in blue armor leapt through the window. Falling behind him was a small boy wearing a cap. Princess Tia, I'm sorry. I know I'm a bit late, he said. Sir Pedro, so you did come after all. Whoever said that? Tremendous smile floated onto the princess's face. Somewhat embarrassed, the boy returned the smile. Their eyes locked and words unsaid passed between them. Hey, there's a time and place for things. The Duke, having been completely ignored, was sputtering in anger. As the Duke seethed, his second-in-command was stealthily sneaking up on the still-bound princess. He reached out his hand for the princess's shoulder. The Blue Knight leapt forward like a bolt from a crossbow. Blarg! The pitiable second-in-command, having taken a direct punch from the Blue Knight, collapsed against the wall unconscious. That's a bit much. Duke Gaston, now white as a sheet, fled the room in a stumbling lurch. Princess Tia, let us hurry. Your crowning ceremony begins soon, Pedro said. Yes. Escaping the manse, the two were pursued by the Duke and his guard. However, as if to obstruct their path, a scarlet shadow fell down, shaking the ground. Sorry, but I'm going to have to get in your way. I'm afraid thoroughness is the #1 part of being a puppeteer, after all. The way he spoke made it hard to believe it was just a job. It was the masked puppeteer Harlequin and the Crimson Demon Doll Calamity. The final showdown. Also, before I get to the next chapter, thank you for gifting a sub to Sword Sage, Allegory. Congrats on being subbed once again, Allegory. I appreciate it. Allegory, as usual. Sword Sage, enjoy this G status. Yo. Alright, next chapter. We're getting close. Chapter 18. The duel between Red and Blue. White blade met deadly claw. Blue and Red twisted about in blinding fashion. The cover to the fight had been cleaved off. Oh, you're moving better, Harlequin exclaimed. Surprisingly, the Blue Knight's movements were just a little bit faster than that of the Crimson Devil puppet Calamity. I broke it all to pieces too, but to fix it back up in just one day, looks like the old man found himself a good apprentice. You know my master? Harlequin twirled his fingers and Calamity fluttered its wings and slowly lifted it into the sky. We have a bit of a history, yes, he giggled. But forget about that, what'll you do about this? As he howled these words, the red puppet swooped down. Pedro pulled the strings back and the Blue Knight narrowly avoided the grasping claws. Or this! Smooth as flowing water, Calamity sent out its log-like tail to swipe at the knight. Pedro's threads flowed down and to the right. Dropping its center of gravity, the Blue Knight shifted his sword to a slant and redirected the force of the tail upwards. Or this! Calamity swung its horned head round and charged straight for the Blue Knight's torso. Pedro snapped his threads upwards, and to his left this time. The Blue Knight, who had let itself fall slightly back, now slashed his sword down in a blur of light. With a small, pleasant cracking sound, the crimson wing on the right side of the puppet was hewn straight off. He chopped that shit off, that's all you need to know. 4 more chapters, let's go. Chapter 19. Red Hot Roar. Slightly panicked, the masked puppeteer wrenched back on the strings and put space between himself and the Blue Knight. Hey, how about we call it a draw here? Knowing it was hopeless, Pedro still offered. As he expected, a happy voice called back, Now, don't make bad jokes like that. It's been too long since I've had this much fun, after all. Seemingly drunk on warped joy, Harlequin twisted his hands about in a complex motion. It looked almost as if he were drawing magic circles in the air. I didn't think I'd end up using this, he giggled. Calamity crossed both arms across his body, as if holding itself. Slowly, a burning scent filled the air. A cold chill ran down Pedro's spine. He set to moving the Blue Knight, but realized the princess was behind him. You can regret it in your next life, Harlequin screamed. The Crimson Demon took an imposing stance. Its massive jaw creaked, there was a rushing of air, and then a ball of brilliant flame spewed forth, so basically did a giant Hadouken. The area was engulfed in a violent pillar of swirling fire. The Blue Knight, Pedro, and the princess were all swallowed by the inferno. Shh, so that's it, is it? Guess it was kind of a pity to end it there, huh? Gazing up at the roaring flames, Harlequin muttered regretfully. However, his eyes soon narrowed, puzzled. No scent of meat roasting or metal melting reached his nose. What? The crimson maelstrom began to swirl faster, and the center suddenly departed as if blown apart from the inside. From the middle rose a blue twister. Oh shit. Chapter 20, y'all. The whereabouts of the death match. From within the flame, the Blue Knight arose. Across its shoulders, Pedro and Princess Tia could be seen clinging, hale and hardy. What had blown away the raging flames was a tremendous two-handed sword, spinning the enormous blade like a whirlwind. A butterfly made of flame danced above the Blue Knight's head. It was a fantastical scene. You think that'll work? Harlequin began gesturing again. It seemed he intended to launch another fireball. I won't let you, Pedro cried. Splitting through the wall of flames, the Blue Knight forced his way forward. In the next moment, Calamity's horned head was cleaved perfectly in twain. In two. I wanted to just throw it in twain there. Absolutely wonderful. The fireball, moments from release, puffed up with a crimson puppet and caused a small explosion. Flung by the shockwave, the Blue Knight was tossed into the air. Pedro braced both legs and managed to catch it. Sir Pedro, are you alright? I'm fine, yeah, but I don't think there's saving him. Though Harlequin may have been the foe, his was still a life that had been taken. Pedro felt the guilt of such a deed strike him. Princess Tia, seeing Pedro so troubled, enveloped him in her arms. I'd appreciate it if you wouldn't kill me off so easily, said a whispering... Oh, sorry. That was probably somebody else saying that? I'd appreciate it if you would kill me off so easily, said a whispering voice from inside the pillar of flames. The voice seemed somewhat satisfied. I applaud your efforts, young man. I'll back down nicely this time. Looking forward to when next we meet. The ground shook and a red and black shadow launched skyward and disappeared from sight. Pedro and the princess looked at one another and burst into relieved laughter. Okay, so Pedro was freaking out because he thought he killed the dude, but the dude didn't actually die. So everything was fine. He won and he ran away. Retreat for now. Chapter 21, here we go. The Dollmaster's Purpose. The boy, the girl, and one puppet left for the capital on light feet, while the masked puppeteer fled into the deep forest riding his scorched creation. Stopping suddenly, the masked puppeteer spoke to the shadows in the trees. You're there, aren't you, old man? Noticed me, did you? Pedro's master priest stepped out from the cover of the trees. As always, the black priest was with them, but it was a curious sight, for the puppet had no arms. As I thought, you fixed the blue puppet's arms with the parts from the black priest. No wonder it moved so well. Well, the gap between you and Pedro was a bit too much after all. I took it upon myself to give him a helping hand. Oops. Damn it, I clicked before I was in reading. Shit. Hold on. Harlequin's shoulders sunk in response to the words of his old puppet master. Well, I don't mind since I had fun, but if and when the 13 factories find out about this, I don't think Pedro will have it too easy either, do you? The 13 factories. The moment he heard those disturbing words, Capri's expression darkened. Ha ha ha! Well then, see you soon. Leaving behind a suppressed laugh, the masked puppeteer disappeared into the deep forest. It is a road all puppeteers must pass, the old puppet master muttered in a quiet voice, almost as if he was telling it to himself. Alright guys, the finale, here we go! A moment's rest. I also just got an achievement for reading all of the Blue Knights, so don't I feel epic. Alright, afternoon in the palace began with a tea party in the gardens. The princess as always filled 3 cups with black tea from the pot. Please enjoy your tea. Thank you very much, Pedro said. Behind the boy sipping tea stood a knight armored in blue. However, he had not a word to say. What happened to the Duke in the end? On the end of the crowning ceremony, Duke Gaston had disappeared with his vassals. After all, his plan had been foiled and the queen successfully crowned before countless countrymen. The royal guard, whose allegiance had been questionable before the coronation, fell to their knees and in contrition swore their loyalty to the new queen. The Duke, before he could be held for the crime of abducting the princess, understandably chose to flee the country. My uncle has chosen to entrust himself to the Empire. Apparently he sought protection from the imperial prince that he had arranged as the husband for me. The queen smiled slightly. However, it seems as if they consider him something of a pest. I feel a bit sorry for him. Pedro was amazed. They do not deserve your sympathy. In truth, Pedro did not think that Duke Gaston, whatever, would back down so easily. And what of the machinations of that foul masked puppeteer Harlequin? Capri, Pedro's teacher, seemed to know the gesture, but simply dodged any questions about him with frustrating vagueness. Regardless, Pedro knew another battle would come, and soon. He would have to upgrade the Blue Knight if he hoped to emerge victorious. Oh, Pedro! A slightly irritated yet comforting voice snapped Pedro from his reverie. Do you wish for your tea to grow cold? The clear blue eyes, which met his own, carried their own message. It will be all right. Pedro, a little embarrassed, took his tea and drank deeply. It was enough to simply have this moment with her. The end. Now I can take a breath. Now do it again. I wasn't paying attention. No! Fuck you, Sword Sage. Well, if you weren't paying attention, it's in the VOD. It'll be in a video later. You can rewatch it. I don't give a fuck. Oh my god. Why did I do that? It's all your fault, man. I commit to the bit. I commit to the bit! Remind me of Nier all over again. Fucking Nier. It's that Hulk of man's in. I thought you were a bear when we first met. My. Jeez. I'm just a dedicated mofo. I know, Frog. I know. I'm actually exhausted having read that. My god. Okay. I guess we'll just check. Oh, this door doesn't seem to be open. It's because that lore, though. Yeah, it is, Ryoshin. It's that lore. This should be the ambassador's office. Shall we say hello to Elsa? Let me do that in a second. I want to finish looking around first. I thought it said the door at the end, but I guess the door at the top of the stairs. Oh, Zin, come to Liberal again? Hey, Yakumo, it seems I'll be here for a while again. You seem pretty busy yourself. Of course we are. After all, we've got us packed signing poaching. Sorry, but I won't have time to bother you for a while. That's okay. I don't want to talk to you anyways. And yet here I am. Alright, let's talk to the dang fucking Chancellor, whatever she's called. Ambassador, sorry. Chancellor, Ambassador, whatever. The person in charge of the dang embassy, you know what I mean. If Kevin did it in one sitting, so do you. Kevin? Oh, Kevin. Fucking Kevin. When he read that damn story to those kids? Yeah, I know. Anyway, let's talk to the dang girl. Alright, let me introduce you. Yes, come in. Pardon us, Elsa. Why, Zin Vathic. Hello, hello, come in. Last I heard, you'd returned to Calvard. What's an old dog like you doing back here in Granson? Let's just say this old dog had a trick or two more to show off. I'll likely be here in Liberal for a while. As expected of an A-rank racer, I suppose. You never let up, do you? So who's this with you? A pleasure to meet you, ma'am. I'm Estelle Bright of the Bracer Guild. These are, assistants, Olivier Lenheim and Chloe Rins. A pleasure, Ambassador. It's a pleasure to meet you, Ambassador. The pleasure is mine. I'm Elsa Cochran, Calvard's ambassador in Liberal. I get the feeling this is a bit more than a social call, though. I'm afraid so. Estelle and her party asked about the threatening letter the embassy received. Ah, the letter, yes. You're helping the Royal Army investigate the matter, then? Technically, yes. Threats of terrorism aren't exactly something the Guild can ignore either, though. Would you mind helping us out? Well, I suppose we're all stuck in this situation after all. What would you like to know? Well, to start with, do you have any idea who would have sent that letter? Like, does anyone in the Republic oppose the signing of the pact, or... Well, of course. You're looking at one, after all. Huh? Elsa, please. Try not to tease these kids too much, yeah? Well, the truth's the truth, Zin. I'm pretty sure I've chewed your ear off about Erebonia enough for you to know what I think, Well, yeah. Still, Mrs. Bright, don't misunderstand me. President Rocksmith and Parliament have already approved the pact. My personal feelings won't get in the way of my job. Right. Is there anyone else from Calvard who might oppose the pact? Oh, certainly. They're all tiny groups, though. And to be honest, there's no real reason to oppose it anyway. No reason? I don't quite follow. It's not worth bothering. The pact doesn't have any practical effect. It's simply agreeing to the statement we shall not rely on violence to solve international problems and negotiate instead. It's more of a declaration than anything else. But it is little more than a promise which can be broken without consequence, save a loss of face, no? Precisely. The worst it could do would be to rally other countries against the aggressor. Now it's true that relations between Ereboni and Calvard have gotten worse than usual over the past decade, so there is some value in establishing Liberal as a place where we can negotiate. But again, who'd bother opposing that? Yeah, doesn't really seem like the thing you sent a bunch of threatening letters about. Well, Ambassador Cochrane, if you don't believe someone from Calvard is the perpetrator, then whom do you suspect? Huh, well, my gut, of course, tells me to blame it all on the Erebonians, their militaristic hawk faction, specifically. But frankly, even they have the new engine on the line. They aren't so stupid as to cut off their noses to spite their faces. The new engine? Wait, you mean the one from the RSI? Yes, an engineering sample will be provided to both Calvard and Erebonia. It'll happen right after the signing, in fact. Whoa! Ah, as to be expected from Queen Alicia. She holds both Empire and the Republic in the palm of her hand. Yes, I have to admit she's handled this masterfully. That cutting-edge engine is going to be the birth of a whole new generation of airships designs. And Alicia is practically handing it out, so long as you sign this agreement, and play nice with it, and each other, at least for a while. Even the most testosterone-poisoned ninnies among the Erebonian hawks wouldn't want to miss this chance. Yeah, I guess so. Which means, of course, that the possibility that either the Republic or the Empire interfering directly is pretty low. Indeed. I'm sorry I can't be of more help. No, you were a big help. Just being able to cross suspects off the list helps a lot. Oh, speaking of which, though, we'd like to ask you about something else. Stella asked Ambassador Cochrane about Ren's parents. Harold Hayworth and a merchant from Crossbell. I can't say it rings any bells, I'm sorry. He's never visited the embassy, at least. Darn. Well, thanks. Do remember that Crossbell sits directly between Ereboni and Calvard, however. You may want to inquire at the Erebonian embassy as well. Okay, thanks, Ambassador. And thanks for being so open with us. You're quite welcome. I'm glad I could help. By the way, you said your name was Estelle Bright? You wouldn't happen to be Brigadier General Bright's daughter? Oh, you know Dad? Of course. The heroic vanquisher of the Imperial Army, and now the head of Liberal's Royal Army. I'd heard he had a daughter, but I didn't expect to meet you like this. Well, I'm just kind of an inexperienced newbie myself still. You're off to a good start then, I think. We at the embassy have relied on the Guild a number of times in the past. Should the time come again, I hope you'll aid us, Miss Bright. Well, if the chance comes up, sure. Well, we'll see you around. Whew, what a long conversation, but we got a little bit of info out of that, I guess. Mostly that Ereboni and Calvard probably not involved, but it does make sense. It was my suspicion that it's probably either the organization, aka Ouroboros, or somebody who's on allied with Ouroboros from our side that sent all the letters. Okay, I'm gonna take a quick water break because my water's almost gone and I read that whole story and I need more water. I'm sorry, I need a break again. Just give me a minute to refill my water. But what's up, Junge? Welcome, drunk man. How are you tonight? Other than drunk, I hope it's a good drunk and not a sad drunk or a mad drunk. But anyway, I'll be right back with some water. Okay, back from my water break. Let's, okay, we just came out of the Calvard Embassy. I guess while we're in this area, let's go ahead and take a visit to the Erebonian Embassy as well. Hello. Hello, Bergen. You've been well, I hope. Olivier? Where the hell have you been? Why, I've been places. What's wrong? Huh? What's wrong, he says. You've been totally incommunicado ever since you went to Elmo. Major Vander's about ready to throw you out the window. Aw, he wishes to launch me like a love rocket. How adorable. Olivier? Did you seriously forget to tell Miller, whatever, at the embassy you were with us? When wandering the roads, hunting for love, one must be discreet and secretive. Well, Bergen, may we enter? I can't say no to you, but, who's with you? Oh, we're from the Bracer Guild. We'd like to ask the ambassador a few things, if that's okay. We thought we'd try having Olivier introduce us. Oh, okay. Well, there shouldn't be a problem with letting you in, then. I guess not. Welcome to the Erebonian Embassy. Do remember that the embassy is Erebonian soil, so be careful, ya. We will be. Ya. Ya. Ooh boy. Welcome to the Erebonian Embassy. It looks more, I don't know, regal than the last. This is quite the building. Whoa. This place definitely matches the Calvardian Embassy in terms of fanciness. Jesus. Grandiose and yet powerful at the same time. It's very imperial, if nothing else. It is a stage upon which the Empire can parade its influence and power. Alas that the actors are unequal to the set dressing. You realize Lord Cranar would hit the roof if he heard you say that. I'm sure this is that one dude. Yeah, him. That guy. Ah, my most bosom companion. It has been an age. Are you well, dear Muller? I would be better if I could cut you in half and be done with it. I told you again and again to ensure we're constantly aware of your location, and you... Ah, but it is a tactic in the War of Love. Did you know absent makes the heart grow fonder? Still, Brighton, you have my thanks. I can only imagine the trouble this idiot's been causing you. Actually, he hasn't been too bad, I guess. He's been really well-mannered, comparatively. Well, ignoring the lunatic, I presume you have business here at the embassy. Yes, sir. We would like to speak to the ambassador. Stella explained her desire to meet with the ambassador concerning the letter. That letter? Right. I'd been somewhat concerned myself, but I'm surprised the guild is active. This is the request from the Brigadier General Bright and the Royal Army, I take it? Technically, yes, but we're trying to investigate it as neutrally as we can, you know? Nobody's guilty till proven, that kind of thing. A commendable mindset. No doubt why he chose you. Very well, I shall introduce you to Lord Ambassador Cranar. I suspect you'll find it easier to gain his trust if I do the introductions as opposed to a certain someone. Really? Thanks, Muller. Yeah, thanks. Thank you, sir. Wait, you really have so little faith in me? You, thought we had faith in you for this? If you introduced us, he'd probably want to have us kicked out. Sorry, Olivier. Oh, the sting of being forsaken. The sting of the truth, maybe. Lord Cranar is in his office on the second floor. I shall go announce your arrival. Give me a moment. We'll wait then. Let's look around. Oh, it's been a while, Olivier. Are these your guests? Indeed, one could call them guests, but I'm more inclined to think of them as my soulmates. Our days spent together have been so tender, so sweet, I feel to merely call this forced love does a disservice to our bond. Is that not so, Estelle? Wait, does that mean you've dumped Muller? My head hurts. I think I'm starting to understand Muller's suffering. You've dumped Muller? Oh, Olivier, you, what's the word I'm looking for? You beautiful bastard. That's the words I'm looking for. It's really not the words I was looking for. Closest imperial city to liberal borders is a place called Parm. Okay. I'm actually from there, by the way. It's close to Bose, which makes it convenient to return home for visits. Of course, it's not so convenient to visit the imperial capital from there. There aren't many public scheduled miners in Erebonia, so I have to switch over to the railway system. Hey, Olivier. Heard you went to the hot springs. I'm so envious. I've been working until I'm dead on my feet, getting ready for the signing ceremony. Well, don't be jelly. Be jelly AF. All the books in this room were published in liberal. To learn about someone's nation, start with their culture. You're free to read them, but please put them back where you found them once you're done. Oh my god. Please tell me there's not a whole nother story here. There is, isn't there? Carnelia series. Okay, so this one's way shorter. It's not 22 chapters, it's only 11. Damn it, why does it have to be only 11? Because now I want to read it. Shit. Why couldn't it have been 22 and I'd have been like, nah. Ah, oh, fuck me. God damn it. There's more pages in each chapter, though? Fuck. God damn it. Ah, you bitches who know too much about this game are making me want to goddamn read this. Alright, I'm reading it. Fuck it. Oh my god, 10 pages of chapter? I regret everything already. Oh, I regret everything. Oh, God. Alright, fine. I'll read it. Son of a bitch. Okay. 25,000 words. It might be. Shit. Alright. Chapter 1, The Imperial Chronicle. Here we go. I stood there upright in front of the revolving door, scuffing the heels of my boots against the ground, pulling slightly on the collar of my trench coat. I dropped my chin and gazed at my partial reflection in the curved glass. Aside from my short-cropped hair, I wore a modest-looking, double-breasted leather raincoat and a pair of the special order steel and reinforced boots, both of which at first glance appeared to be a most common apparel. Yet, they were in fact much more than the naked eye could detect. My ordinary average appearance was of just as much importance today as it had been on any other day in times past. Not far off, the sound of footfalls echoed rhythmically like the steady beat of the pendulum swinging back and forth as the throngs of those coming and going moved quickly along the cobblestone avenue, enveloped and tinged silver by the morning mist. At times, the calling voice of the street peddler disrupted the steady flow, but as soon as the hawking cry faded away, it would resume its course. Each morning that I found myself setting foot in the Imperial City, I also found my surroundings to be unchanged and stained by the same somber tone of gray. Snatching up a magazine from the underarm of the street vendor, I tossed a few mirror into the left hand, poised expectantly behind his back. The Imperial Chronicle, the magazine I read so often that even the ink bleeds were familiar. Roughly flipping open its cover, I scanned the headlines along the top of its monochrome pages. Then suddenly my breath caught in my throat. At the very bottom of the local news page, I found those letters. The sequence of characters which I had not heard nor seen since the time of that life-changing incident. My eyes instantly gravitated to the spot, and for a time remained fixated. Ein cellmate. The very meaning of those letters became lost to my senses as I stood motionless, my gaze fixed on the same line of text until it all seemed to coalesce into my single blotch of ink. After a few seconds of blank comprehension, my vision settled and I wrenched my eyes to the beginning of the article. As I began to read, my memories verged on a single point in my past and then slowly started to run in reverse, heading for that fateful event 3 years prior when his name was first introduced to me. It was on an afternoon all those years ago on a day not unlike this one, where the capital was overshadowed by its typical gloomy aura. I was a little younger than now, a 22-year-old boy who stood silently in front of a boutique door as usual, double-checking his appearance before lightly treading over to Mick's Imperial Factory. It was on this day that it had been arranged for me to receive a new job from Mick, the shop owner himself. Although he was a drab, middle-aged man, I, being the Orbman enthusiast I was, had found myself as one of the few regular customers. I headed down the dank alleyway, and after passing through a partially rotted wooden gate, I could see the soft glow of the flickering orbital light just outside the entrance of the factory, whose structure was halfway below street level. I first began receiving jobs from Mick about the time when dissension began to occur in society over the 100 Days' War. It was during this period that relations between Liberal Kingdom and the Empire were at the worst, and the importation of ordnance had become almost non-existent. Conspiring with underground elements and planning a smuggling operation, Mick made me out to be his accomplice in crime, for the job which I received by his hand was none other than that of a courier. Being nothing more than a commoner in my teens at the time, I met him in a juvie devoid of any connections in life. I met him in a juvie devoid of any connections in life. Besides, I naturally jumped at the opportunity without a moment's hesitation. Yet, even after relations with Liberal had returned to some degree of normalcy, I realized I was in no mood to give up my specialty, which focused mainly on the delivery of stolen goods. The reason being there was no job out there which could bring in the kind of mirror this one did. With an unrefined and inconspicuous appearance I had countless times before, hidden items of various sorts in my hat and trousers, and made my way hither and thither, between the borders of these neighboring nations. And though, to my delight, my wallet had become increasingly laden with the bounty of monetary rewards, I had routinely changed my alias as a precautionary measure, so much more in fact that these false names had built up into quite a list over the last few years. I had been known as Phil, the frivolous Rooney, the trickster, and even Chris the coward. However, Mick had always called me by one name, Toby. This was the identity I had used for my initial job and the one I liked above all the others. Ooh. This is a book series you collect as you progress in the first game. Is it? I guess I didn't collect them all or something. Did I collect these in the first game? I don't even remember. Are they all going to be 10 pages? Because that was a long-ass 10 pages. The gist is there's the kid. He got a job being a smuggler. That's pretty much all I got out of that whole chapter. Ah, the train station. Wow, one whole page less. Cool. Hello there, Toby. You've come at just the right time. Greeting me with these words, Mick shuffled slightly in his seat behind the counter. The baked confection he had been eating was ever so carefully placed atop his lap to prevent it from falling onto the floor. He smacked both of his powder-sugar-covered hands together with a clap, and a cloud of white particles puffed into the air. The smell of sweet spices and baked apple pervaded the dimly lit shop. We had an item dropped off no more than a few minutes ago, he continued. Turning in his seat, Mick reached back and snatched up something, an old magazine paper from off the shelf, tossing it to me. Knowing full well I wouldn't get any sort of the answer, I asked anyway. What do we have this time? Laying out my railway and airship tickets, Mick ignored my question, said, make sure this gets to the same place as always. In his slow drawl, he added, slow drawl, he says as he reads really fast. It would be in your best interest to keep your involvement to a minimum by leaving the business side of things to me and focus solely on getting the job done, Toby. He leaned back on his chair and let out a deep sigh, the balls of his fingers kneading the bags under his eyes. Then once again, his large hand extended down toward the unattended cake resting on his leg. Before the sweet treat could reach his watering mouth, I had already made up my way out of the door of his tiny shop. As I walked, the waste paper bundled package bounced around inside the folds of my bag. By the feel of its shaping weight as it beat steadily inside against my side, I concluded that the object in my possession was probably just more swag. It did make me nervous not to know what it was I was carrying, for I had done this type of job many times before, and no matter what kind of trouble I found myself wrapped up in, I had always somehow managed to come out unscathed. In truth, my experience on the job had made me tough, and I had become well versed in the art of orbital magic, so it was when I laid my eyes on the rough-looking trio at the station, I felt no more knots of uneasiness in my pit of my stomach than was necessary for someone of my abilities. The platform for the train bound for Liberal was a bustle, with passengers awaiting its eventual arrival. Seeing that the benches were so crammed full of people that they could have very well been a tin of packed sardines, I resigned myself to standing near the entrance as I patiently waited for the train to come in. Twisting my body in order to move the bag to my other shoulder, I noticed the figures of two men. Heads bent together and conversing in an inaudible tone, they stood beyond the ticket gate, right about where the horse head of the imperial emblem lay embedded in the ground in the grand mosaic of tiles. After a short interim, another man approached and joined in the conversation. From my own perspective, this was one ragtag group I most certainly couldn't have given a passing grade to based on looks. All three were extremely well built and sported the same haircut, to put it mildly, they stuck out in the crowd like a bunch of sore thumbs. Making sure to avoid eye contact with them as they glanced in my direction, I slung my bag onto my shoulder and ever so calmly reached my hand into my pocket and ran the tips of my fingers across the surface of my ornament. A woman's voice reverberated within the walls of the station, notifying the passengers that the train had arrived. The low rumble of an orbital engine could be felt in the distance, and after a few moments a large vehicle was seen rolling up on the shoulder. I muttered to myself, all is well, but the sound of my voice was drowned out by the din of the massive machine. Brakes screeched and a flash of black light reflected off the surface of the giant iron beast as it came sliding in across the rails. The immense vibration in the air emanating from the moving locomotive at its epicenter let me know that the orbital engine had been put into full reverse in order to decelerate and bring the train to a grinding halt. While being shoved to and fro by the waves of impatient travelers flooding out of the waiting area, I was swept toward one door of the passenger car. As we passed by the conductor, I caught another glimpse of the ticket gate. The men who were once there were now gone, and the only thing that remained was the profile of the horse made of the glossy tiles, glaring back at me in a shade of deep crimson. Huh. So a bloody mess. Whew. You get either Estelle or Joshua's final weapon if you collect every chapter in the first game. Really? Well, I don't think I did that, Rio, but here we are reading it anyways. That was only chapter 2, by the way. Chapter 3. Representative of the Septian Church. Oh, look, it's more than 10 pages. Yay, it's 12. Ugh. The train barreled on, almost flying through the thick veil of fog. Droplets of water splattered against the window glass, extending out like transparent veins, and continued to wriggle back and forth under the pressure of the swiftly passing wind. Placing the temple of my head against the glass, I stared blankly down at the tickets in my hand and rubbed the two of them together between my fingers. I would be traveling by the train to the border city, far south of its imperial cousin, and then to reach the Liberal Kingdom I would have to transfer to an airship. Both of my tickets were first class, but not the highest end seats available. The passenger car was nearly full of capacity, or nearly at full capacity, but for some peculiar reason, nobody had seated themselves in the space next to mine. As I mused about the empty seat, it occurred to me that Mick may have purchased the spot ahead of time, leaving it vacant on purpose. There was no doubt in my mind that he was being paid handsomely to make sure this job was done well. Will you be traveling to Liberal Kingdom, sir? Right around the time my trip on the rails had passed its halfway mark, I was met with this sudden question and set up with a start. My eyes searched for the one who asked it. There, standing in the aisle, was a single woman with a radiant complexion beaming down at me. She wore a coat with overlapping buckles secured slightly above her breast and appeared to be in her mid-30s. Gingerly bending her knees and pointing her finger at the empty seat beside me, she asked, "Do you mind?" Uh-oh. About to get tricked by a lady. With a tilt of her head, she indicated that the rear of the passenger car where swirling smoke saturated the air and softly muttered, "The smell from the tobacco smoke is just dreadful." Wordlessly, I nodded and dragged my bag from its place on the floor, moving it over by the window to the opposite side of my feet. The woman expressed her thanks and delicately sat herself down in the seat next to mine. For being a perfect stranger, she talked on endlessly, and I appropriately reciprocated the conversation by saying that I was on my way to Liberal Kingdom on business as an orbit specialist. Her story was that she was on a mission of mercy for the church and had an errand to fulfill in the border city. "Just so you know, people sometimes refer to me as sister," she went on. "Of course, it's just a nickname." She recrossed her black leather boot-clad legs and let out a sort of suppressed titter from the back of her throat as she made mention of this. Sister Carnelia was her nickname. We continued on in this fashion, subjecting ourselves to the variety of idle banter, and as the time drew on, the sun overhead began to dip in its arc, crossing the celestial meridian and descending into the west. Each time the moving train cleared a grove of trees, the entire vehicle, passenger, cars and all, was bathed in a warm apricot hue, flooding into the cabins, creating a majestic spectacle. I gasped at the coruscating effect, and so we locked eyes with Sister Carnelia right at the moment. The brilliance of the sinking western light seeped into her rich brown irises, causing them to give off an exquisite rubescent sparkle. Rubescent sparkle. The glimpse made me wonder if the origin of her nickname was somehow related to the color of her eyes being likened under the luster of a polished carnelian stone. The train gradually began to decelerate, and Sister Carnelia returned to her original seat in order to collect her bags. As a matter of habit, I checked my bag and ornament and found both the junk paper-covered package and the magical device fastened into my trousers inner pocket by a series of chain stitches, exactly where and how I left it. A woman's voice came over the intercom system announcing that the train would be arriving on schedule and that rainy weather was to be expected at our destination. At the conclusion of the announcements, a number of disappointed sighs could be heard coming from along the rows of seats. Raindrops pattered against the windows outside as the looming silhouette of the overcast city came into view. The station signal lamp illuminated an angular light which was scattered with a refractive effect by the falling droplets of water. Then it came a spine-chilling metallic sound, followed by the jolt of the orbital engine's reversing thrust as the locomotive at the front of the train lurched to a halt. Over the loudspeaker came another announcement asking passengers to ensure that they did not leave their baggage behind, and with that several people stood up and crowded into the aisle, watching a station worker in uniform as he waved a small flag amidst the falling rain. I picked up my bag and rose to my feet. I crossed paths with Sister Carnelia as I attempted to step into the aisle, but when she tried to step aside, allow me room to pass, she suddenly tripped and fell forward. Grabbing onto my shoulder for support, she picked herself up, and with an embarrassed smile, let me by. I gave her a short bow in line with general etiquette practices, then headed for the exit ahead of her. Following my lead, Sister Carnelia shuffled along closely behind me, so close in fact that it felt as she would step on my heels. Something about it just didn't feel right. Instinctively sliding my hand into my pocket, I searched for my ornament, but the brass feeling I had grown accustomed to was nowhere to be felt. In an instant, I felt my arm being twisted behind my back by someone or something with incredible strength, the sleek sound of a blade being unsheathed, and then a warning prick at the tip of my back indicated the seriousness of the situation. "I have what you're looking for, Toby," whispered Sister Carnelia in an almost inaudible tone, her lips barely moving just behind my right ear. "Let's not try anything either, shall we? I'd hate to see your afternoon spoiled any more than it's going to be." And to show that she meant business, Sister Carnelia slightly altered the angle of her grip on my wrist, causing an explosion of agony that sent sparks flashing behind my eyes. "That deceitful whore!" What did you expect? Come on. Human fodder. Alright. Sister Carnelia spoke to me in a tender tone as she sent a wave of immense pain rushing through the whole of my right hand. "I won't have any trouble with you now, will I, Toby?" she asked. Far from eyes just brimming with tears, I nodded my head in consent as the salty streams of water ran down my face. Satisfied with my answer, she loosened her grip, and I felt the pain vanish as if it had all been some sort of illusion. With a wry smile, she further added, "Don't get me wrong, Toby. I've been sent here to protect you by the goddess herself." This is what she said while instructing me to keep my eyes focused on what lay beyond the window glass. Yet there was something about the way she pronounced the last syllable of my name that really rubbed me the wrong way. Little by little, this line of passengers slowly began to flow out of the train car. Prodded on by Sister Cornelia, I inched forward while keeping my gaze on the platform through the passenger car window. Down the stairs, which led me to the front ticket gate, were the figures of those men from earlier this morning. The three thug-like passengers who had been loitering near the large horsehead emblem of the tile at the Imperial Station. A muffled laugh echoed from her throat as she too noticed them. Well, isn't this a warm reception party you've got going on? Cocking my head, I quietly pleaded, Give me back my ornament! Sister Cornelia said nothing. Members of the crew bid us farewell as we stepped through the exit to disembark the train onto the lead-colored platform below. Angrily, I thought to myself, damn it, what's wrong with these fools? Can't they see what's going on? I shut my eyes halfway to protect them from the drizzle whipping against my face, and I unhurriedly descended to the west set of stairs a half pace at a time. Sister Cornelia moved along behind me in precisely the same length of stride. Below, the group of thugs waited expectantly at the bottom of the stairs, waited for me, no doubt. Contemplating the rate at which I was going, I ultimately believed it was only a matter of time before I would be headed over to the enigmatic group. I caught sight of their soured faces as the distance between us grew smaller, and felt the heat of my left hand tightly gripping my bag grow in intensity until my palm began to sweat profusely. Hitting the midway point of the stairs, Sister Cornelia suddenly whispered in my ear, Keep your eyes peeled on the ground, Toby. I did as I was told and cast my gaze down upon the tips of my boots, stained to a darker shade by the rainwater. Then, right at the moment, I let out my breath. I felt a deep sense of pressure just below my shoulder blades as I was forcefully shoved forward. Droplets flew from my saturated fingers, and my world turned upside down as I tumbled down the stairs and slammed back first into the group of hoodlums. With a muffled crunch, I felt the painful sensation of my ribs crumple under the weight of my body, and then return to normal from their severely compressed state. Two of the seemingly military men who were hit as I toppled down the stairs, like an avalanche unleashed on a pair of young saplings, absorbed the transfer of force and were thrown into a large puddle collecting on the ground nearby. Shrieks erupted from startled passengers nearby, more shrill than the high-pitched sound of the railway brakes from a decelerating locomotive. As my world spun wildly about me, I lay there, the chill of the tiles something on my back. Sorry, I clicked it accidentally. With the concerted effort, I rolled my eyes to the left where my arm remained in an outstretched state. By some act of the goddess, I had managed to keep my tight five-finger grip on the bag I had been carrying. In an effort to get up, I slid into a prostrate position, keeping my chin in contact with the ground. Making a low visual sweep of the vicinity as if my life depended on it, I had noticed the military-like physiques of the men had vanished from view. The only figure I saw standing above me on the platform was that of Sister Cornelia, and on her shoulder, as if she was merely hefting a sack of grain, was one of the men. Turning in the direction where the train sat in its motionless state, she lobbed the unfortunate man down onto the set of empty rail tracks below. By this time, I had risen to one knee while keeping the other planted firmly on the ground in a half-standing position. The world in front of me was still swaying, undulating in my wavering eyesight. My head slowly rocked back and forth as a double vision of Sister Cornelia's boots approached me. Then, with a strong grip, she tugged on my hand for some strange reason or another. When she did this, I failed to notice the unpleasant feeling that her hand wrapped around mine brought. Oh, okay. Let's go, Toby, she instructed in an authoritative voice. Nearly dragging me, she pulled me to my feet, and before long we were hightailing it out of there. The onlookers made quite a commotion as they moved hastily out of the way in a determined attempt not to be caught in the middle of our flight path. The bag in my left hand swung helplessly, knocking against my thigh. After clearing the ticket gate, Sister Cornelia finally let go of my hand, but a sickening, slippery sensation came with it. Looking over at her, I realized that the stomach-churning, slimy feeling on my hand had come from the bright red blood which stained both of hers. I peered back over my shoulder in the direction of the platform as I continued to run, but the figures of those three men who had been waiting for me at the station were nowhere to be found. So Cornelia's kind of a badass. Is she on his side? I mean, she's clearly a part of this whole situation. That was chapter 4, right? Yeah, okay. Sorry. Okay, chapter 5. Goddamn. These are all 12 pages! Stop it! Be less! Emissary of the Sabbath. I sat staring at a partially melted lump of butter on a stack of cold pancakes. Picking up a fork, I poked at them, and after turning the top one over, I daubed the milky yellow substance between the rubbery layers. In doing so, my interest in what had sat atop my plate faded to nil. A hanging lamp dangled overhead, making a sporadic buzzing sound as if its honey-colored light flickered, creating jittery shadows and distorting my vision within the inn. The pouring rain outside didn't appear as if it would let up anytime soon either. Bringing my face closer to the window, I peered through this film of water flowing down the outside of the glass as I tried to make out the dimly lit avenue. Although the station house sat right at the end of the road where we were lodged, all that was visible was the side of the structure obscured by a shadow which prevented me from being able to see the platform. There's nothing to be worried about, said Sister Cornelia as she returned, wiping her hands with a handkerchief as white as newly driven snow. Stretching the square strip of cloth out, she sat down and placed it neatly on her lap like a napkin. Then in a reassuring tone, she added, We've seen the last of them for a while. Watching the tips of her fingers move as she smoothed out the wrinkles in the piece of the fabric resting on her legs, I was hit with a sudden flashback reviving the awful sight and coppery scent of the sticky blood which had covered those hands not more than a few hours before. How can you be so certain? How can you be so certain? I asked, still having more than a few reservations. Because that's how these types of crime syndicates work, she replied, clearly seeming to know all the answers. The waiter came and set a plate in front of the Sister Cornelia with a soft clink as the base of the glassy dish tapped lightly against the hard surface of the table. After scooting the meat-laden porcelain plate closer to her, she licked off the sauce, now covering the tips of her fingers in an almost sensual way. Sickened by the bloody image already in my mind and now the sauce, I tossed my fork aside and leaned heavily back in my chair. The city outside began to fade into shades of gray, and by the time Sister Cornelia was finished tucking away her steak, it had completely sunk into the darkness of night. I questioned her again. How can you be so certain that no one will come after us? Using a piece of black-crusted bread to wipe up the last drops of sauce, she answered. Because that's how they function. One unit consists of 3 people. Then, as if remembering something else important, she added, That group that was after you, they're a Jaeger Corps. Upon hearing this, I recalled seeing some of those men at the landing port some time ago. Only the most renowned and skilled mercenary groups have the honor of calling themselves a Jaeger Corps, or at least that's what Micht had told me about them. They were soldiers of fortune who were said to relentlessly follow the flow of Mira wherever that happened to lead, and they would stop at nothing to get at it, even if it meant spilling blood. Warhawks, mercenaries without borders, and a group never to get involved with. Oh. Is what Micht often had to say about them. Instinctively, I slid my foot forward and checked the location of my bag with the tip of it. It's quite simple, really, Sister Cornelia explained as she reached for her dessert. You, Toby, are carrying something that's apparently got a lot of people on edge, and someone's hired a Jaeger Corps to take you out. But it's not me they're after, it's what I'm carrying. It's all the same, she retorted as she gulped down her tea in a single breath. They're going to kill the courier before they even think about searching the contents of his bag. A butcher kills a cow before someone grills the steak, not the other way around. Lecturing me for all the while, the Sister Cornelia took a glossy, tallow-handled knife in hand and sliced into her apple pie. The powdered sugar sprinkled on the flaky crust danced under the golden light. I felt a stabbing pain of guilt race through me just above my gut. Unexpectedly, I began to think about what Micht could be doing at the moment, but my short period of rumination was cut short when I saw Sister Cornelia's hands stop cold. Glaring into the darkness, eyes focused and intent like a hunting dog's, she saw something she shoved something shining onto the table and eventually rose to her feet. There it was, my orbment. Where are you going? Without pausing to answer my question, Sister Cornelia expeditiously fastened the buckle of her coat. You've got good taste, Toby. One at a time, she set her heels on the chair and tightened her bootlaces. Using the full capabilities of that orbment is no small feat. I think even most bracers would be in for a real surprise if push came to shove with you in the ring. Growing ever more impatient, I asked again, So where is it exactly that you're going? That's none of your concern, came the answer. Suffice it to say, I will be seeing you again on the morrow. And with that, Sister Cornelia disappeared through the door of the women's restroom. As if exchanging places, 2 other men entered the restaurant. They walked directly to the table at which I sat and stood before me. Flashing the emblem on his chest and without making any sort of eye contact, one of the men said, We're with the Bracer Guild. I apologize for disturbing you in the middle of your meal, but you'll need to come with us. Why don't you just take a seat? Actually, you know what? Why don't you get a free receipt? You're going to have to come with us, sir. I see. Bracer Guild's after me as well. You just ate a bunch of cinnamon donuts, Frog? It sounds delicious. If you pay for it, oh well, at least it was delicious, right? Okay, chapter 6. The last one on this shelf. Fucking A, we still have one more. Shelf. Oy. Hey, look, 13 pages, even more than the last fucking few. Awesome. Oh, I can't wait. I can't wait. What a boring video this is going to end up making, me reading the whole fucking time. Just books. Fucking books, man. My orbment, empty bag, and package wrapped in old magazine paper were laid out neatly on the table in front of me. The bracer sitting opposite me gazed alternately at my face and the items on the table as if trying to gauge my reaction to them, constantly rubbing his chin between his fingers. It appeared to me as though he were making an effort to display his right hand, snugly fit with a leather gauntlet. I had been led to the second floor of the lodge by the 2 men, and then after they had painstakingly checked the layout of the floor, I was taken to the farthest room from the stairs. It occurred to me that the reason for the use of this makeshift space was due to there being no guild branch nearby. The first man to sit in front of me was the lanky one. He told me his name, but I soon forgot which one was Clayton and which one was Pavel. About the time I had finished being frisked, the bracer wearing the gauntlets, Clayton or Pavel, whoever it was, returned and whispered something in his partner's ear. It seemed as though they were trying to locate Sister Cornelia, but having no luck. After much probing on the subject of her and the Jaeger Corps, and after relating everything I had heard from her on the train, I turned the conversation around and playing the role of the victim, inquired into her past history. Though strictly speaking, I guess I was in fact the victim. Her name is Cellmate. Ein Cellmate. Read aloud the lanky bracer from a pocketbook he held just below eye level. Originally a constituent member of the Jaeger Corps, her present affiliation and activities are unknown. In short, added his partner pompously, she's not the type of person any upstanding citizen should be getting involved with. He reached out his gauntlet-clad hand and picked up the object bundled into scrap paper. Checking my reaction all the while, he unwrapped the paper, laying it out flat in the center of the table. Its contents turned out to be a lump of metal ingrained with a sort of clay-like substance. I blurted out, "I was on my way to a research institute with the item with everything happened," and then threw in the address of some non-existent client for good measure. The bracers took notes, making sure not to leave out any of the details of our conversation. Then, to dispel any lingering suspicions, I agreed to stay with them under their watchful eyes for the night. The next day, I also found myself inclined to go along with them to the nearest guild branch in order to file a report about the events that had happened back at the station, but I had no qualms over the matter. My greatest concern at the moment, after all, was not running into any more trouble. I awoke as the sun came up over the horizon and day broke. With the advent of the peaceful morning, I sat up in bed and breathed a sigh of relief. The bracers who had stood guard the previous night were no longer present in the room, but the sound of their voices could be heard echoing out in the hallway beyond the closed door. Slipping my arms through the sleeves of my jacket, I felt a sharp pain in my right elbow, which brought back vivid memories of the woman from the day before. Suddenly, a feeling of uneasiness came over me, and still half undressed, I began adjusting my orbment. After opening its back cover, I used a thin piece of tan doeskin and started plucking out the quartz installed in each slot. It doesn't take but 5 minutes to insert them each into different slots and rearrange their configuration with a set of light magic as my base. One by one, I replaced each screw until finally the metallic panel was back in place, and a feeling of calmness set in. I rolled back over in bed. It was at that time that a tall woman appeared to be a maid, opened the door carrying a basin of hot water for the sink, with which guests could shave and wash their faces. After placing the small steaming tub on the table, the woman went quietly about her daily task of removing the bed linen. Finding myself shooed from my own bed, I reluctantly headed toward the basin, when just beyond the open door I caught sight of two shadows cutting across the hallway in succession. "They're here," I heard myself mutter as the low tone of my suppressed voice reached my ears. With only a bar of soap in hand, I remained unbelievably calm as I quickly shut and bolted the door. Then, pondering my next move, I stood still with my back pressed up against the wall. On the other side of the hardened clay wall, the brief clamor of fighting ensued. Fumbling with the chain attached to my hip pocket, I grabbed hold of the orbman I had adjusted just barely moments before. It was two braces versus the two others I had seen moments ago. Throwing myself into the mix with the two men from the guild would definitely put us at an advantage from a number standpoint. However, when I turned again to face the door, the voice of his self-doubt came percolating through my closed lip in the form of a distant mutter. "There were only two of them?" I murmured to myself. If Sister Cornelia's words to be believed, then one unit consisted of 3 people, not 2. Again, I questioned myself inwardly. Then where's the third? The hair on the back of my neck stood on end as I realized my plight. Something swung down over the top of my head, catching me around the neck, and the next instant I was flung to the ground. From the corner of my blurred and spotty vision came the inexplicable view of a woman with demonic, bloodshot eyes standing over me, trying to wrench the very life out of me, and with every twist of the sheet she had wrapped tightly around my throat. Clutching my orbit in hand, I activated it and fired off a burst of magic while lying half asphyxiated on the wooden planks of the room floor. The destructive vortex of the compressed air sliced deeply into my hip, but at the same time caused the woman to double over before forcefully blowing her into another part of the room. Shreds of whirling linen, flecked and sprayed with fresh blood, blasted out through the gaping hole in the wall where a closed window once stood, leaving nothing but shards of broken glass and a frame rent beyond all repair. So basically the maid that came in to clean his room was one of the Jaegers. Understood. Okay, well that was the halfway point on this story. So, well, sort of. That was chapter 6. It goes to 11, so... past the halfway point. More pages, though, of course. Chapter 7, The Death of a Friend. Wheezing, I breathed in, the sound high and whistling as the air fought to make it through my constricted windpipes. Still clutching tightly to my orbit, I unwound the sheets from my throat. Utterly exhausted, I tilted my head on its side and watched with reddened eyes as a small stream of saliva dribbled down over the edge of my mouth and pooled onto the floor. When fresh air finally made its way into my lungs, it initially choked me nearly as badly as the sheet had. A thump from somewhere behind startled me from my fit. The Jaeger demoness, like a spring-loaded doll, leaped up from the floor of the room. A single shot of magic I had previously landed in her gut should have done the trick, but the fluid way she moved about made it appear as if she was unfazed by the blast. Within arm's reach of where I had subconsciously curled myself came the splintering sound of unseasoned wood being honed down by a giant woodcutter's axe. In the following instant, Sister Cornelia came flying through the newly opened hole in the timber door, her entry punctuated by a cloud of splinters. Her arms as pliant as whips, she passed by the female Jaeger in lightning-quick motion, and with a turning assault, clocked her opponent full tilt in the face. The woman spun with the force of the blow and fell to a tumultuous thud, her head cracking hard against the floor. Like a prima ballerina, Sister Cornelia raised her knee high until she had it tucked securely up against her sternum. She stared down at the outstretched figure on the floor, muscles flexed and without an ounce of mercy. Sister Cornelia let her judgment fall with the heel of her boot, stomping down and crushing the wretched woman's throat. Damn! Crushed that throat. As I witnessed the grotesque and unsightly scene, Sister Cornelia gave a quick glance in my direction and beckoned me on. Then, with a nimble hop into the unknown before, she cleared the broken window frame and lighted to the ground below. Quickly scraping my belongings together, I made after her in the same manner as she had left, out the window with a two-story drop to the cobblestone sidewalk below. Waiting close by and helping to break my less than elegant fall, Sister Cornelia led me on as we took flight along the avenue, brightly lit by the morning sun. A deafening blare from the orbital engine's whistle indicated that the first train was about to depart. Sister Cornelia immediately pulled a ticket out of her coat pocket and held it out to me from the side. Reaching for the fluttering strip of paper between her fingers, I realized that I was still carrying the bar of soap from before, so I chucked it, not caring where it landed or who it might hit. Aboard the train, the smoggy haze from the incessant smoking of the nattering gentlemen had permeated into every nook and cranny of the passenger car. There was also the smell of newly printed publications and the occasional sound of someone clearing their throat. It felt rather awkward to have boarded a train bound for the Imperial City with my bag still in hand. Do you know what your problem is, Toby? I'm too good looking. I mean, you're just like that orbit of yours. Using her white handkerchief, she stanched the flow of blood from my leg, which had been lacerated by the spinning arrow blades of the magic. Once you get yourself into trouble, you keep digging yourself in deeper until someone comes along with a billy club and whacks some good sense into you. Placing a folded magazine on my lap, she tapped on it with the nail tip of her index finger, indicating that I should read what was inside. It was a copy of the Imperial Chronicle, which had been published that morning, a several-lined article buried pages behind more titillating news, told of the suspicious death of one orbital factory owner somewhere within the capital. This was the first time I ever became aware of Mick's real age. Sister Cornelia continued her lecture as she mercilessly upbraided me for my reckless behavior. You missed being caught up in all of this by a hair's breadth, she informed me coolly. At a loss for words over the shock of Mick's death, I put the magazine away in my trenchcoat pocket. Another 5 minutes in that shop and you would have been gone to meet your maker too. I shook my head with trembling lips, let my thoughts fumble out of my mouth. I just don't get it. Why did Mick have to die? Images of Mick's cold body behind the counter alienated in my mind, with that of a lump of metal wrapped in scrap paper. Just what the hell had I been carrying all this time, and why did anyone have to die over it? I pondered at length. Sister Cornelia met my eyes and held them. Because it's an artifact, she said simply. An artifact? I scoffed as I blew off her answer. It's not like I haven't carried a bunch of them before. Artifacts, in short, were the remaining legacy of an ancient civilization and a generic term for the unidentifiable mechanism which resembled that of an ordnance. I had spent many days as my courier smuggling any number of items under the false pretense that the goods I was carrying were nothing more than rare antiques, and rarely placed them in the hands of those aristocrats amongst whom they were especially in vogue. For the most part, my current possession appeared as though it belonged in the same group as the others. Personally, I could find no other value in the collecting of these artifacts besides the indulgence of oneself in a decadent hobby. Chiding me as if I were a clueless child, Sister Cornelia rebuked. You're wrong, Toby. This one's much more different than the others. After a moment's pause, she added, It's alive. Unable to grasp what she had meant, I looked at her with the questioning expression on my face. Sister Cornelia tried again. What I'm trying to tell you is that it still works. Although I'm not really sure what kind of power it actually has, it was unearthed during an excavation within the Empire's territory about 30 years ago. Sister Cornelia's subsequent story about the peculiar lump of metal told of the dark history surrounding a group of aristocrats who relentlessly sought after it. The artifact itself had transitioned from hand to hand, but those in power, as one after another, they were murdered while slumbering in their bedchambers. Then, at the end of the 100 Days' War, its whereabouts were said to have been lost. And strangely enough, it finally turned up in the capital after all this time, she said, finishing up the account. An announcement chimed in the passenger car notifying those riding of the scheduled time of arrival. Sister Cornelia uncrossed and recrossed her long legs. The one who's after that artifact hired that Jaeger Corps to bring it to them, whatever the cost. So as a result, I was dispatched by the church in order to protect both you and it from falling into their hands. I sat staring down at the bag resting next to my feet as we approached our destination, and the moving train quietly began to lose speed. Oof. Ever closer, y'all. Ever closer. Chapter 8. In the bowels of the Imperial City. Hey, it's 11 pages. Hallelujah. Moving purposefully through the crowd, we made our way between the rows of seats. Each time the swinging bag in hand struck the side of my knee, I became keenly aware of its presence. It was an unnerving feeling, quite like I had unintentionally brushed up against someone in an offensive way. Furthermore, it was nearly inconceivable to my mind that the ancient relic the Jaeger Corps were pursuing with such a frenzy was sitting right here inside the stitched cloth of this cheap handbag. What a fool Mick had been. Hadn't he known the burden this object would bring would be one more weighty than the both of us could have ever hoped to bear? I squeezed my eyes shut against the thoughts flying around my mind and addressed Sister Cornelia, who followed closely behind me. Will we be making a break for the cathedral once we get off? Yes, that's the plan, she answered, scanning the scene outside the window of the passenger car. I think that's the only option we've got if you want to make it through this day alive. The station where the train was set to arrive was unremittingly crowded with countless droves of passengers, and as usual the sky was slightly overcast. Everyone outside on the platform stood shivering in silence with their collars drawn up to their ears, huddling close to one another for warmth like a flock of waterfowl out on the tideland in midwinter. Don't worry, I won't be tossing you down a flight of stairs this time, Toby, jested Sister Cornelia. Although, if there were 2 more of you at my disposal, I might have decided otherwise, she added. Evidently, the numbers in our welcome party this time had seen a rather dramatic increase. The odds don't appear to be in our favor, she said in a low voice, her warm breath tickling the lobe of my ear. We won't be able to leave through the ticket gate. As soon as we stepped off the train, we stealthily moved to the opposite end of the platform, and after sneaking out a large door for only authorized station personnel, we jumped down onto the path of the railroad ties and steel rails below. The biting cold wind of the capital swept freely across the unobstructed railroad tracks, causing me to shudder as if it ruffled our coats with a chilly touch. Slipping between the couplers of a pair of freight cars, we moved cautiously along their edge, sticking close to the shadows. Over on the cargo platform, workers were busy unloading containers. For someone who had his mind set on becoming a dealer of pilfered goods, gaining illicit entry into the station house would be one of the first of all basics. Showing my ticket, I spoke politely to one of the workers, then with a scenario picked out in my head, I sold it to him as I played the part of a manager here on business with a celebrity of notable repute. Midway through our conversation, I introduced Sister Cornelia, who did her best to show the man a glamorous smile and feminine pose. I had possibly gone a bit overboard when I stated that she was an opera singer, because the way she had carried herself made her look more akin to a low-wage cell song in a bar of drunkards. Oof. Yet in spite of it all, the worker graciously let us through. You're so good at that. It's almost scary, Toby, Sister Cornelia said as we raced through the station's warehouse sector. You should seriously consider doing another job, she went on. I bet you're going to tell me to join the Bracer Guild, right? Come on, those guys would turn me down in a heartbeat, I said as I laughed off the thought, then throwing the idea back in her coat, I said, So how about yourself? Why don't you join the Bracer Guild? Reaching the end of the warehouse sector, we came to a stop in front of the large chain link fence. Since Sister Cornelia crouched down and while sliding a drainage cover to the side, laughed at my previous question as if it were insane. Are you kidding? She asked. They'd gun me down the second I set foot into one of their branches. The winding, narrow stone tunnels like the one we were in ran everywhere beneath the Capitol. We crawled along as the light shining through the drainage gates on the side of the large road above us illuminated the way like a trail of flickering oval lampposts. The feet of those walking along the avenue passed right by where we were, but not a single person noticed us scraping our way along below them. For some strange reason or another, the world just beyond the thin flagstone-paved road appeared so dazzling in my eyes, yet the Jaeger Corps lost the artifact in hand, and a senseless, sudden death, all of which had never crossed my mind before, lay in wait for me, dared I to venture into the open world above. As we pressed on, I began to think that the small round tunnel which we were crawling through would run forever, when finally it merged with the high-ceilinged sewer surrounded by walls of countless blocks of chiseled stone. We'll go through here and we'll make our way over to where the cathedral's located, Sister Cornelia insisted. Raising one brow, she pointed her finger upward. It's a lot safer down there, rather down here, than it is up there. That's fine and all, but what are we going to do if we get attacked? Or do if it gets attacked? Sister Cornelia grabbed my hand, and with that, stepped into the muddy darkness beyond. Don't worry, Toby. Faith isn't the only thing supporting the church. Badass motherfuckers apparently are too. If you're wondering why I started giggling, fucking Rio. Apparently my audio's been muted since chapter 2 of the Pedro story earlier. I guess I should restart, huh? That's not actually true, obviously. But you did make me have a moment of panic for like 2 seconds, Rio. I was like, oh, bastard. Can you do it again in voice act in other languages for a broader appeal? No. I'm already getting exhausted enough reading in English. I got 3 more chapters to go, motherfucker. It's alright, Rio. I appreciate it anyways. Can you cosplay as Cornelia? Alright. Wait, did they actually describe what she looked like, or just that she had something like strapped around her bosom and she had like thigh-high boots or like knee-high boots? That's the only 2 things I remembered. Is it so wrong that that's the only 2 things I remembered? Oh, she has brown eyes. Or maybe that was a different girl. Shit, I already forgot. No, she definitely had brown eyes because he sat next to her on the train. Definitely had brown eyes. Alright. Chapter 9, right? Alright. Cornelia. The flicker of dying orbital lamps mounted at equidistant lengths along the sewer walls sent thin streaks of light across the surface of the rippling flow of the filthy sewage. Passing in front of these one by one, Sister Cornelia sped down the stone sidewalk as the sound of her body cutting through the racing tunnel winds trailed out behind her. Panting and out of breath, I continued to move my feet toward in the darkness, which lay before me as I chased after Sister Cornelia's flickering shadow. Wayworn yet without a moment of repose, we headed unrelentingly with our sights set on the Cathedral of the Septian Church. We moved swiftly across the moss-covered stone pavement, the clacking of our heels echoing in the dimly lit underground. Above ground, the walking distance on the city roads from the railway station to the cathedral was about 3 blocks. If we made our way up through the drainage ditch just beyond the sluice gate, we would find ourselves in the public square outside the massive sanctuary. Up ahead, the light of another orbital lamp came into view. Turning her head in my direction without a word, Sister Cornelia extended her hand outward and her right hand outward in a wide motion indicating that we would be turning that way at the next corner. Then, as if preparing for something, she rolled both shoulders in a grinding motion and relieved the last of her tension with a pop of the neck. It seemed to me as though she knew all too well what was lurking within the tenebrous conduit ahead. Under the unsteady and sporadic coruscation of light, the body of Sister Cornelia surged around the corner and disappeared from view. 1, 2, 3 went the walloping echoes, followed by the sound of something being rolled into the channel of filthy sludge. As I turned the corner, the first things which leapt into my sight were the contorted figures of 2 men on the ground, whom I barely missed treading on. Sister Cornelia, who was up by this time several steps ahead, continued to run at her usual pace as if nothing had happened during the preceding seconds. "It's Cornelia!" came an angry but noticeably wavering voice from behind. I glanced to my rear to locate its source, and there I found a man who had dragged himself from the fecal-filled liquid, now lying next to his dead comrades, yelling with his dying breath as the blood leaked out of his open mouth. "Cornelia, she's down here!" He managed to croak before falling silent and still. Sister Cornelia paid no attention nor made any effort to look back. I turned my face forward and followed her example. The walls of the conduit leading directly to the sluice gate squared out into an ominous mouth of darkness, seemingly waiting for its next unsuspecting meal. Sister Cornelia gradually slowed her pace to match mine as I had by this time become completely exhausted and out of breath. "It looks like these guys are dead serious about getting their hands on that item this time," she said as she focused her eyes on the darkness before us. "So, were those men old friends of yours or something?" I inquired. Sister Cornelia turned to face me with her darkened scarlet eyes. "Is that what you heard from those bracers the other day?" she asked. I nodded my head and questioned her no further. With head slightly turned down, I forced myself onward, eyes fixed on the tips of my boots. Unexpectedly, Sister Cornelia opened her mouth and said, "Do you remember that woman you had a run-in with back at the inn?" I nodded slightly. "The whole reason I gave up my life as a mercenary is because I didn't want to meet a tragic end like that," she continued. "A life of no meaning, forgotten by all." I looked up at Sister Cornelia, and seeing a slight show of emotion in the side of her face, heard her repeat the same line of words a few times more before finishing her thought. "If I'm going to cash in my life's chips, then I think it's best that I fight for something worth fighting for. At least that way, I'd be able to leave a legacy of my existence behind." Taking in her words, I ran steadily behind her as I felt a sense of nondescript apprehension slowly begin to creep over me. During the short intervals between breaths, it suddenly seemed to me as if I were hearing the faint sound of sloshing water from behind, which caused me to prick up my ears and turn my head in its direction. "So you noticed it too, huh, Toby?" Sister Cornelia slowed her step until finally coming to a complete stop. "They've blockaded us from behind, so there's no turning back now," she said, the direness of our situation heavy in her voice. We had arrived at an intersection where the conduit we were in and another crossed paths, and just beyond the wide, fetid flow of sewage water before us, I could see the dimly lit sluice gate. I placed my back against the damp bricks of the nearest wall, and for a moment tried to catch my breath. "They're probably lying in wait for us," Sister Cornelia assessed stolidly after glaring across the flowing sewage of the merged channels, and then turning her head to the rear and narrowing her eyes again. And unfortunately this time, we won't be able to circumvent them. With a sound of composure revealing her utmost resolve, Sister Carnelia took in a few deep breaths. I laid my hand on my orbit, gripping it in the palm of my sweaty hand, and then wrapped the strap of my bag securely around my opposite wrist. And as always, Sister Carnelia checked her boots before standing upright. Then taking a few steps back and holding my breath, I raced forward and darted into the Stygian flow of waste. Oof. The climax is here, y'all. Chapter 10, right before the finale. The Last Stand. Sister Cornelia made such haste that she aimed for the path on the opposite side of the sludge-filled channel that I could have sworn she was actually running on the liquid surface, based on my observation of the minuscule spatters her feet produced, and of course she passed me in the blink of an eye, space growing wider and wider between us as I continued to trudge my way through the filthy muck. Flashes of magic erupted from the darkness by the sluice gate and ripped through the air in rapid succession, but none of them could overtake the speed at which Sister Cornelia moved. In an unyielding offensive by the shadow aggressors, the settled feculence in the depths of the channel was thrown up in the form of a powerful tsunami, and in an instant, before clearing myself from its destructive path, I feared that the terrible wall of sedimented filth would crush me under its weight and bring me to an unsightly end. With a mid-air spin to avoid the last of the oncoming magic, Sister Cornelia flew to the opposite side of the channel with incredible speed, hurtling the wall of piled-up sandbags behind which the attackers took cover. She whirled her arms in a ferocious onslaught, one by one, like rows of pins being struck by a weighted object. The line of standing Jaegers crumbled to the ground. Sister Cornelia's attacks were like a whirlwind of death, blurry with the speed at which they struck. They came in advancing inconceivable angles, puncturing throats, slashing open arteries, and then they were gone. So it was that when I finally reached the cobbled path beyond the stagnant channel, not a soul was left standing besides Sister Cornelia and myself. The cathedral's at the end of the ladder just beyond this gate, she indicated as she flicked dripping blood from her fingers like a child who forgot a handkerchief to dry her wet hands. Her eyes shone with the afterglow of battle. The Jaegers can't be far behind, so we'd better hurry. She warned as if to punctuate her warning. The damp sound of numerous feet kicking up water as they advanced toward our present location had now become clearly audible to my ears. Stepping over the handful of Jaeger corpses lying scattered about behind the wall of sandbags, we made our way for the dry bed channel which lay ahead of us. I placed my hands on the slightly damp stone floor of the empty channel and crawled through the half-open door of a sluice gate. A falling water droplet struck the nape of my neck as I passed through the cramped opening, causing me to stop dead in my tracks. In the moment that followed, I recognized the sound of an orbment overhead on the verge of discharging a burst of magic. "Toby!" came the ostensible voice of Sister Cornelia as my vision was instantly flooded with a wave of exceeding brightness. Then, in the midst of this world of blinding light, came the hand of a savior which grabbed me firmly by the shoulder. The powerful feeling of being dragged and the explosion produced by the magic rupturing stone were almost simultaneous. As the booming roar swept across the whole of my body, I was thrown backwards toward the ground. Despite my clouded vision, I managed a somersault before landing in a prone position. Choking on the filthy puddle I had fallen face down in, I lifted my head in time to see a cloud of blackened dust being heaved from the mouth of a halfway raised sluice gate door. And as if my worst nightmare had now become reality, I watched as one after another the blockading Jaegers emerged from the smoky cloud, each bearing a glinting blade. I floundered about on the slippery mud and watched as their ranks sprang into action and closed in, their rugged facial features now visible to my eyes. Instantly rolling to the side, I unsheathed my hidden blade as I attempted to deflect a wide arcing slash of another with my bag. The cloth of the bag, over which the sharp edge ran, split open with a sound, and the paper-wrapped ornament fell onto the cobbled floor. Frantically, I searched for the ornament at my side, but I was unable to get a grip on it because of my clumsy, panic-stricken state. One of the mercenary men, his eyes intent on my throat, drew back his long sword to end my life. But before he could make his move, a dark silhouette appeared from behind him. It was Sister Cornelia! Her hands, moving with such finesse, disarmed the man in an instant and left only his sword behind, before he was launched from view into the hanging shadows and shadows veiling the dank conduit. As the sound of the falling sword struck the ground with a high-pitched clink, Sister Cornelia dropped to her knees. Her soft-whispered words were full of regret. "I'm sorry, Toby." With her head bowed forward, I watched in disbelief as several streaks of blood began to run down the side of her face. "It looks like the goddess may be calling you home, too," she said gently. Once again, Sister Cornelia rose to her feet, her coat hanging in tatters. Eyeing her outer garment's ragged state, I knew for certain that it had been caused by the previous blast of magic. In order to protect me from harm, Sister Cornelia had willingly used her body as a shield to absorb the brunt of the force. And now, A stain of the effervescing crimson blood had begun to seep through the cloth covering her breast. I swiped up the artifact, which had tumbled to the ground from the hole in my severed bag, and tore away the wet paper, which covered its surface. Then, with the cold lump of metal in my hand, I placed it atop my ornament as I gripped them both tightly together. The sound of footfall from the Jaeger Corps had now subsided. They stood in a cluster with their swords drawn, effectively blocking any possible escape through the sluice gate. Through the sluice gate, Jesus. Sister Cornelia let out a shrill cry, and I, as if taking the sound to be a command to attack, unleashed the energy pent up within my ornament. The device roared, and at an instant, the magic was discharged. I felt an intense wave of searing heat graze over my cheeks as my entire body was immediately blown backwards by its powerful force. Stunned, I collapsed onto the floor. When I finally forced my eyes open, I could see Sister Cornelia standing above me with her back turned to face me. Her right arm had lost all strength to function and hung limply at her side. Dazedly, she slid to her knees and slumped onto the ground before me. I pulled Sister Cornelia close to myself and hugged her tightly, blasted the pack of assailing mercenaries with an instantaneous wave of magic, but then it was all over, my last stand ending as soon as it had begun. Countless razor-sharp sword tips stared down at us from all sides. Convinced that I had finally reached my life's terminus, I raised my hand and, while placing a false hope in my ornament that it could somehow protect us, I activated it, the last of its energy being consumed as it was drained empty. Whirling arrow blades spun around us as I closed my eyes and accepted my fate, and behind my darkened eyelids, an endless realm of whiteness began to spread out before me. Well, I'd love to say we're done, but we gotta get the finale now. One more to go! Let me get some more water. Holy moly. A legacy never to be forgotten. Here we go. I was swallowed by the light only to be spewed moments later onto a patch of hardened ground. The air was filled with the scent of sun-baked earth, yet for being the floor of some grandiose heavenly estate inherited by those in the afterlife, it felt quite like the flagstones I had grown accustomed to in my past life. Upon feeling around in my immediate surroundings, my searching hand found soft locks of disheveled hair. It seemed as though Sister Cornelia had come as well as I to meet our creator firsthand. Okay, sorry, I read that wrong. Gradually, as I lay there, I felt something warm swell within the pit of my stomach. Weary and spent, I just let the feeling spread over me. It was about this time that the sound of murmurous voices started to fill the air around us. Warm breath tickled across my nose and brow, letting me know that I was being stared at directly in the face. As my eyes adjusted to the intensity of the light, I realized that I was looking into the face of a young girl who beamed back at me brightly with the widest of smiles. However, she seemed a bit young to hold this esteemed position of the goddess. The knell of the bell overheard rang out loud and clear. Strangely, it sounded exactly like the cathedral's distinctive toll. Taking in the series of events to be rather odd, I picked myself up and at last awakened from the dream which had temporarily invaded my senses. There it was, the familiar cityscape, the sounds, and even the scent of the breeze. I knew this place by heart. It was the public square of the Imperial City which unfolded before the great cathedral of the Septian Church. I opened the fingers of my right hand and stared down at the metallic lump in its palm, entrusted to me by Mikt. Golden filaments of light swirled across the surface of the artifact. I instantly recalled Sister Cornelia's word. "It's alive," she had said, and as I watched the ancient light gradually fade away before closing my hand around its surface once more, I believed it. Supporting each other by wrapping our arms around one another's shoulders, Sister Cornelia and I hobbled and limped our way toward the magnificent cathedral as the awe-inspiring figure of the goddess Eidios stood silently with unfurled wings watching over us from the deep-hued stained glass window above. And as for the events which followed, they were all settled in an orderly fashion. The metallic lump which Sister Cornelia had so daringly risked her life for was turned over to His Eminence, the Cardinal, who presided over the cathedral. He disappeared with it through the thick open door of a sacred vault. The level of corruption which had spread like a plague among members of the imperial court, influential aristocrats, and even commissioned officers in the imperial army, astonished even those mediators acting on behalf of the Bracer Guild. I stayed close by Sister Cornelia as she was laid out on a pew within the chapel of the cathedral. The real sisters of the church delicately pulled off her coat and cut open her vest, now stuck to her body with dried blood. Upon doing so, they found an ornate shirt of chainmail just beneath the layer of her clothing, which for some strange reason seemed to bewilder them all. The next day, a certain aristocrat who had hired the Jaeger Corps to carry out his selfish bidding agreed to relinquish the artifacts in his possession in return for keeping his estate. Hence, his collection of forbidden antiques were brought under the safekeeping of the Septian Church. Sworn to secrecy, I made immediate arrangements to take leave for the Calvard Republic, my destination, a high-class resort, which turned out to be an excellent way to recover physically and mentally, as well as forget about the series of events which had occurred to me over the past few days. Or occurred over the past few days, not to me, but they occurred. Naturally, the bracers assigned to provide my escort were none other than Clayton and Pavel, who before we left guided me without a word to where Sister Cornelia was resting. I talked with Sister Cornelia, who had awoken for a short interval, but as I got up to leave, she reached out her dainty hand and said to me, "Before you go, I want to tell you my real name. It's Ein Selnate." I took her unblemished hand in mine and gripped it firmly as I expressed my appreciation for what she had done. And today, now 3 years later, I stood staring at her name once again, but this time printed on the page of Imperial Chronicle, Ein Selnate. Below those printed characters ran a few lines of an unembellished article. Yesterday, a corpse was discovered in an urban area of the capital just before dawn. The body was found to be covered with multiple stab wounds. The departed in life had been involved in charitable work and brought salvation to many afflicted souls in various regions throughout the land. As I read the last line, I envisioned the deceased figure of Sister Cornelia lying motionless upon the darkened street. Yet despite the blood-stained face I envisioned in my mind, I saw her as she rested in peace, a gentle smile crossing her face and vindicated of any transgressions in life. As I rolled up the copy of the magazine in my hand, I brushed my hand lightly across the shining bracer emblem pinned on my chest. Almost 2 years had passed since I converted to my new line of work, which Sister Cornelia had so graciously recommended to me, and finally, I had even become used to using my real name. "Toby," came the whisper of Sister Cornelia as it resurrected in my ears. Now only known as Toby, I pressed my forehead up against the cold, clouded window of the passenger car, the refulgent eyes of Sister Cornelia shining brightly like a cornelian stone, forever ingrained in my memory. In my mind's eye, I watched as her coat sleeves trailed out behind her, and she dashed away into the darkness of my memories. Opening my eyes, I gazed out through the window glass, and there I saw the bleeding rouge-colored illumination of the Imperial City as it faded away beneath the heavy white fog. The end. Did I put you all to sleep yet? Holy shit, dude. Why do I do this? It was a good story, to be fair. It was very unnecessarily wordy, I agree, Frog. Lots of descriptors that didn't really need to be there. Good story, though. Good story. Now on to the Crossbell Embassy to read The Lord of the Rings. Yes, let's do it. All 3 books, one at a time. Let's go. You were working and that was a good story time, Shoddy? Well, you're welcome. Don't worry, I'm still going to be reading, because there's still going to be more voices to do, and holy shit. Have I really been streaming for this long? I have done nothing! I've gone to a thing and did one thing, and then I've talked and read for the rest of the time, like, I've got nothing done today. Oh my god. What the fuck, man? What am I doing with myself?